Myers.
Here.
Mr. Conley.
Here.
Dr. Chesney.
Here.
Mr. Birchfield.
Here. Approval of tonight's agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved. Moved by Mr. Trombley.
Support.
Supported by Dr. Chesney. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Brings us to public hearing, grade 5 reproductive health videos. Dr. Gray.
We have Mr. Vecchione coming up. He runs the health committee, and he has a couple things he wants to tell us.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. Good evening, board. We are here today in our first public hearing. I'll walk through the process and explain why we are here. Before I do so, I want to introduce some of our members of that committee. The district-wide Health Advisory Committee has to be composed of parents, clergy, health professionals, and we have 8 high school students on it as well, so we are making decisions for the students. Some of them are here in attendance, and I do want to first introduce Jackie Zeplitny, who's my co-chair of the committee. Jackie, I'm just here for a moment. Jennifer Price Kellner, Samantha Sebastian, McKenna Crossley, Isabella Weber, John Thompson, Ken Stahl, and Alicia Reed are the board reps. In accordance with state law and legal requirements, we as a committee have to review and discuss any kind of changes at all in either content, resources, or materials used in reproductive health at either 5th grade, 7th grade, or high school. This past year, we spent, when I say past year, 17-18, we spent time reviewing videos and to replace our reproductive health videos in the 5th grade. We have not replaced those in approximately 20+ years. So we thought it would take a little bit of time to do so. They're on VHS still, they're a little bit outdated. So the purpose of the public hearing is for us to recommend our revisions to that resource for the 5th grade health unit. So we are recommending that we adopt the puberty workshop videos, what is puberty, girls in puberty, boys in puberty, new emotions and new feelings, and a 5th video from a different company called HIV and Me, Marissa's Story. These are used in 5th grade only, and they're used in boys classes only and girls classes. They're not a combined class, so they're separate that age still. We thought these videos really even had a message, the best message for our students. It pushed talking to your parents, it downplayed being embarrassed. It was more up to date on HIV/AIDS compared to what it was like 25 years ago. So we didn't have anyone attend the public preview today, so there really isn't a comments section yet. But we are previewing it again on December 10th at 5:45 here in the boardroom. We'll put the word out again for the public and hope that some people come and be able to have some questions or comments.
I'd just like to make a comment. I want to thank everybody on the committee that did the work in finding these videos and vetting them. It was extremely difficult to find videos that were appropriate for 5th graders, especially when you're talking about HIV/AIDS. And I don't know if everyone in the room is aware of this, but we are required to cover that subject by Michigan state law. So it's not us deciding that we need to expose 5th graders to HIV/AIDS issues. We're required to do that. So I think these videos that we found do a wonderful job of addressing necessary subject matter in a fair and accurate way.
Thank you. I thought so too.
Henry, can you still opt out in 5th grade?
Yes, you can opt out at any of the grades.
So the parents go through a screening process, they'll be able to watch the reproductive video.
Yeah, we usually have an evening for the parents to preview it as well.
Right.
As an elementary principal, parents could come in and actually take the tape home and show it to their children themselves, which is a great option as well. Yes, it's not, we have to show it, we have to present it, students are not required to.
Okay. And parents are informed of this in
Yes.
orientation.
Most definitely.
All right, good. Thank you.
Given the members of the committee, I'm sure the content is rock solid. The question that I have is about the process, that you bring it up for public hearing. You did one of those today, and members of the community weren't in attendance. You do one of those again, and then does it become curriculum? Do we, the board, vote on it, or what are the steps in the process?
We recommend it to the board to adopt it for the 5th grade resource.
Okay.
And it should be on future action, I believe, at the next board meeting, depending on how the public hearing goes.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you. Okay, this moves us into first call to the public. Anyone that wishes to address the board this evening, please step to the podium, state your name, address, and we ask that you limit comments to 3 minutes. Dr. Chesney has a yellow card and a red card to monitor time. Yellow is at the 30-second clock.
First time here, so let me know if I'm doing anything wrong. My name is Ross Jamund, address 1028 Peachwood Court, Brighton, Michigan. I'm here today on behalf of my daughter, Riley, who's and many of the frustrated parents who have kindergartners in the mouse room at Hilton Elementary. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, this is the kindergarten classroom that has been evacuated dozens of times since the beginning of the school year due to a single student that is prone to violent outbursts and fecal smearing. My daughter and 23 other students continue to endure this outrageous situation, despite multiple pleas from many of us to have the student removed from the classroom and given the help he needs. While we are obviously concerned about the student and the harmful behavior that they're demonstrating, our children also have a right to a safe learning environment. Since we started meeting about this at the school in the beginning of October, we've been told by Principal Isley that their hands are tied. While we are deeply grateful for the extra attention that Mr. Isley has been providing this classroom, it seems to me that anyone exhibiting these extreme behaviors and disruptions should be removed from the classroom and placed into an environment that protects him and those around him, especially since hiring a parapro, a dedicated parent for the student, has proven ineffective. A teacher and another one of our kindergartners were harmed on November 20th from another violent outburst in which a chair was thrown by the student. Just like the previous 28 incidences, no communication has been sent home from the school. Most of the parents in this classroom aren't even aware of how serious this has become. I wish I could say that this violence is out of the ordinary, but we have learned this third school in the last year in which this student and his brother have exhibited dangerous behavior and have been extremely disruptive. It seems that the situation is getting worse by the day, and I'm here to say, with many of the other parents, that enough is enough. And I shouldn't have to constantly reassure my 5-year-old daughter that she won't be harmed by this particular student each day, especially when I can't be sure myself. Please help us find a way to protect our children and get this student the help he needs.
Thank you.
Hi, to the board. My name is Courtney Lusk. I live at 615 Brighton Road. And I have twin daughters in a kindergarten class at Hilton Elementary that are affected by the student that Ross Jamund just told us about. And I would like to tell you about the 28 incidences that have happened that we have reported. I do believe that there's more. Incidences like removing shoes and socks and being thrown at our children as they sit at their lunch table. The kids are evacuated out of classroom for rest time and having to sleep or rest in other areas. They're evacuated from their music classes and having to relocate music classes. They, early in October, a toy box was thrown and a child was hit. More early in October, an object was thrown over a child's head. That child went home and told their parents how scared they were. More early October, this child cleared all of the shelves of books. The class was then evacuated, the child was sent home and then did not come to school the next day. A child was kicked on sometime in October also. We're not sure what happened with that. On 10/15, this child started throwing stuff at the children. The children were evacuated to the project room. On 10/16, the kids had to sit by their lockers as this child also had another outburst. A book was thrown at a student. The student did dodge it, but it did hit his foot. On 10/18, this child threw a fit before morning recess. The children were sat by their lockers. The week of October 22nd, my daughter was kicked and moved away from the child. On October 29th, Another child was, on October 29th, nobody was around to take this child to the morning breakfast. He slammed lockers and the children were taken to a classroom across the hall. November 1st, this child was mad because he did not receive a new piece of paper when asked. He ripped his paper, threw it through crayons, and then threw a chair. November 7th, this child threw cards at another student. He was yelling. He was sent to the calming room, and then removed from the calming room as his brother pooped in it and smeared it all over his body. That was the first day with our parapro in the classroom. On 11/8, this child was looking for the teacher's attention. He started throwing a fit and throwing more objects. On 11/12, he was upset and he threw a chair. The other children were moved to sit by their lockers. On 11/16 is when the music class was evacuated. On 11/19, this child punched another child in the face on the bus. On 11/20, my child was hit with a chair that was thrown. A teacher, I believe, was also hit that was in the room. We have at least 4 incidences that we know of that this child has pooped and smeared in the calming room. That is now just an empty room. 54 days of school so far, 48 that we believe that the student was in attendance. That is 58% of the time our children are being evacuated because of their safety. Our children are literally sitting ducks in this classroom. Time has shown that the dangerous outbursts are not getting better. Our children have a right to a safe education. Our children should be learning to read in reading workshop. Our children should be learning to write in writing workshop and working on everyday math. Instead, they're learning to quickly evacuate, to run to their lockers, and to tolerate and show kindness to a student who traumatizes them on a regular basis. We are here tonight to ask for help for our children to be safe and to be able to exercise their right to a safe education. If 58% of that time, if we added that up, if we gave even 15 minutes for the evacuation to happen, for it to be over and then to get back into class, which with 5 and 6-year-olds, that can't happen. That is, an entire day has been lost in education because of this child. We need help. We need a safe environment for our children and for all 24, all 25, the student included. Thank you.
My name is Jason Kilgore. I live at 1030 Beechwood Court. So I can't speak for the other kids and how they are affected by these, by the constant fear of the unknown. I can only speak on how it's affecting my child particularly. Fortunately, my daughter Ari is already in therapy because she has issues with communicating her feelings, and she has separation anxiety because my wife works very long hours. We're lucky that she's already been able to improve on her communications because it's afforded her the opportunity to tell us how she feels about her classroom on a daily basis. She's able to articulate why she breaks down crying at school for more days than she's not crying. She's able to explain why she's asleep in my wife's bed with us every night. And she's able to explain to us why she's having accidents at school now. The short answer to that is fear. She's afraid of being in her classroom on a daily basis. When the therapist was questioning her exactly why she was exhibiting these behaviors when she was making very good progress, she says that saying that she was afraid of the aforementioned student might hurt her, or more importantly, hurt her mom or hurt myself. Because of this, we've had to change our therapy to account for these fears. Our daughter is trying to protect my wife and I because she's afraid that this student is going to hurt us. She is a very sweet, compassionate, empathetic child, and she's being straight. But this puts me in a difficult position as well, because how do I explain to my child that we're safe while we're at home, but I'm sending her to the very place where she feels unsafe? I can't explain that to a child. I can't explain to an 18-year-old child, let alone a 5-year-old child. Mr. Isley, on the first day of school, was emphasizing that classroom safety was of the utmost importance to all the kids, because if they don't feel safe at school, they're not going to be able to learn. Clearly, the mouse room, which they are a part of, is failing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If my child was always having to pay attention to a known threat, how is she paying attention to her teacher? How is she paying attention to her reading and writing? How is she paying attention to her mathematics? She's too busy making sure she's not getting hit by a chair to be able to read a book or learn to write or read. Also, what type of life lessons am I teaching her? We've talked about our patience, empathy, compassion, but now those lessons are being challenged. I don't want her to think it's acceptable to stay in a toxic situation. She shouldn't have to go to school, be forced to be around somebody that she's afraid constantly is going to get hurt. If I were to decide to grab a chair and throw it at you guys right now, I would be forcefully removed, I would be incarcerated, and then I would probably be banned from ever coming back. How am I able to force my child to go in the same exact situation? That's unfair to her, it's unfair to us. Pretty much everybody on this side of the room is here for the same exact reason, because our kids are terrified. They shouldn't have to stick around, look around, hoping they're not going to get hit by a chair, having to hear some kids scream as loud as you can in a room, disturbing students' hallways on the other side of the class, or on the other side of the school. It's simply not fair. All I'm asking is for some help, and we appreciate anything you guys can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Drummond. I live at 1028 Beechwood Court. 2 weeks ago, my daughter was the one sitting next to the student when he decided to pick up a chair. This was the second time he picked up a chair and threw it. She came home to tell me, well, Mom, the student threw a fit today and grabbed a chair to throw it, and I was sitting next to him. But I saw him pick it up, so I ran out of the way and out of the classroom, so it was okay. That day broke my heart that my 5-year-old had to sit there and think about her safety during class and move to avoid a thrown chair. I was glad that she saw it coming, because last week a student and a teacher were not okay because they did not see it coming. Then last week my daughter sobbed for about 30 minutes about the incident, and I just hugged her while she cried in my arms. Finally, when she stopped crying, she talked to me and told me that she was afraid to go to school. She was afraid of getting hurt by the student because she never knows when he's going to throw a fit. Both sides are losing here. Our side for safety, and the child is not getting the help that he needs, and he's not thriving in his environment. So what do we do from here? So we need your help to help this situation. I also have a letter from a parent who wanted to remain anonymous, so I'm going to read this. I'd like to share with you the experience our family has had this year as our youngest daughter has entered kindergarten and elementary. She has often accompanied me to many volunteer positions, and she has grown up in our school. She was excited to finally be a student at Hilton this fall. Unfortunately, that enthusiasm was quickly extinguished as she has constantly been evacuated from her classroom, and she has witnessed to almost daily violent outbursts by a classmate. She has been evacuated at least 28 times in the short 54 days she's been in school. Many of those days, the violent classmate did not attend school, so the percentage of the days he's in school that she had been evacuated is over 50%. Our daughter now goes to school afraid that she is going to get hit by a flying object or a piece of furniture that's thrown. Her fears are well-founded as she has been hit in the head by a flying toy container once already. I send her to school every day, afraid that today will be the day that I get a call that she's been injured because of this student. This is not the experience we were looking forward to for her. This is not a safe and fair education for her and her classmates. Many hours of instructional time have been lost. By my estimation, we've lost about 7 hours of instructional time this year due to evacuations. That's more than a full day of instruction. There is a constant, anxious feeling in the classroom whenever the student is present, despite the substantial efforts by our teachers to keep things as normal as possible. I have constantly been in contact with the administration, who constantly assure me that they are doing everything in their powers to support the student and keep others safe, but that's not enough. It seems one student's right to an education is costing every other student in the class their right to a safe education. I've constantly been told that this situation is teaching my child kindness and compassion for others. If this situation was approving, I might agree. I don't believe this is the case in this situation. Instead, my 5-year-old now thinks that it's okay to continue to be around violent people because they just need help, not to be removed or avoided. She now tries to befriend the student and wants to help him. This is not the message I want to send to a young girl and for her to learn. She should be learning that it is completely appropriate to stay away from violent people. I don't go to work afraid of a coworker is going to throw something at me, and yet I am being told to continue to send my child into the classroom where that could very well be the reality. Last Tuesday, a teacher and a student were hit with a chair when a chair was thrown. My daughter came home full of energy and anger. It took 3 days before her behavior was back to normal. What was the turning point? She was displaying so much anger that I had a chat with her about it when she broke down crying. She asked me how many more weekend days there were and why I just couldn't homeschool her. She asked if she could switch classes. She said that she was scared to be around the student because she never knows when he'll start throwing things. How can we be expected to continue to subject our kids to this kind of trauma? I hope there will be a day when I can ask my child about her day and hear a report of what she learned rather than a report of if she had to go stay safe. Please help us and keep our children safe, and please help get this student the help that he needs.
Thank you.
Hello, Jordan Genso, 1628 Woodlake Circle. My daughter is also in the mouse room. Just a couple things I wanted to bring up. This is kindergarten, and so for these kids, it's their first experience in elementary school, and it's really sad that they are being taught that, this is what school is. This is their first experience, and they are put into a classroom where it's normal to be evaluated on a regular basis. And I was the type, I ignorantly kind of downplayed it at first when I heard about it, only because as a parent, you just assume if something like this is happening, you're going to be told about it. Early on in the year, there was a smoke detector went off at the school. I got a text message, the school was back good, everything. Got further emails and text messages, everything was okay. But yet, on a near daily basis, my child was being evacuated from her classroom, and I would otherwise have no idea if I wasn't told that by other parents. And that doesn't seem to be, a policy that makes sense. And so, I was thinking, okay, as long as they're working at the school, you gotta trust the school, trust that, people whose job it is to deal with these problems, they're gonna be resolving this. But over the last couple months, it's not getting any better. And so there's no reason for me as a parent to believe 6 months from now, the situation will be any different. If we weren't here tonight to bring to the school board's attention. And so, we can't just let it go forward any further. And so I believe that's why, it came to this. And so I hope that, the board is able to do something so that way, a month from now, 2 months from now, something has to be different. It just can't continue indefinitely the way it's been going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Megan Zoll. I live at 3379 Oakmont Drive. I also have a daughter in the class. Sorry, it's getting really emotional for me. You already heard a lot of what's going on in the class. When I pick my daughter up every day from school, and I ask her how her day was, she bases it on whether or not she has to be evacuated from class. If you were to ask my 5-year-old if she feels safe in her class, she will tell you no. So I want you all to just think about that if it's your child. Also, really until I got an email that said that Dr. Gray had been in the classroom with Mr. Isley to discuss with our children the safety concerns, I really didn't know what was going on. You ask a kindergartner what he did for the day, they don't remember. They say they met a new friend, they don't remember their name. They don't remember anything unless you talk to them about it. And how am I supposed to know to talk to my daughter about whether or not she feels safe? And I don't understand how it's okay for you to come into their classroom to discuss their safety with my 5-year-old without me knowing any of this is going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Heather Williams. I live at 8807 North Christine in Brighton. I'm here tonight on behalf of my son Liam, who is a second grader at Hilton. Liam has autism and ADHD. Although Liam isn't in the classroom as the kindergarten that they all talked about, he still is feeling the effects of the student. To fully understand our frustration, I need to start back to when Liam was in kindergarten. Liam came into kindergarten with an IEP and a paraprofessional in place. Come the end of October of that year, we found out that Liam's original parapro had been moved to a new student, and Liam has sub-para since pretty much the start of the school year. This communication did not come from the school administrator. It came from someone else. He finally got assigned para in November and started to make amazing progress. Then come the end of February in kindergarten, I got a call and was basically told, starting yesterday, Liam has a new para. He needs to get used to change. And that was it. Liam's behavior started to spin out of control. And in the classroom, he started to regress. We could not stand by this time and watch this happen. We tried to fight the change. We were told we are following his IEP. We have to do what's best for our students, for all of our students. So we decided to dig deeper into his IEP and realized that administration had in fact not been following it. We hadn't received a single progress report. We had not had a single staffing to determine the amount of adult support that he needed. Once we brought that to their attention, people started to move quickly and to try to fix mistakes. This single situation caused Liam and our family tremendous stress and anxiety. Because of this, we now have in Liam's IEP that if any change happens, there are steps to follow. 1, transition plan, including communication with parents. Shadowing of the familiar parapro. 3, identifying Liam's needs and anticipation of the change. And 4, to include the general ed staff. Now skip to first grade. Liam is having a great year and making progress, but still struggling a lot with reading. He was more than a year behind. In February, administration followed Liam's IEP and gave us a warning, but once again, they removed his para in the morning during the most difficult subject he has, and she was sent to a different student. The administration had a new para fill in during that time. This again threw Liam up, and he started struggling once again and showing signs of regression in his behavior. My husband and I requested a meeting, and we were told once again, I have to do what's in the best interest of all students. And although his whole support team says Liam needs trust in his team and consistency to be a strong learner, but once again, he wasn't getting that. In spring of 2018, we had to put in his IEP the steps it takes to make sure his transition plan was in place if there was a para switch. Jump to this year, second grade. Liam is doing outstanding, however, still struggling a lot with reading. It's actually very concerning, as we talked about it at his staff meeting in October, and our concerns about it affecting his math skills. Additionally, because of recent laws for third graders being held back if they are not able to hit certain benchmarks, we had discussed with his team the overall level of importance and seen significant progress in his reading this school year. Liam cannot afford more setbacks. Unfortunately, outside of the reading, he was finally becoming a full-time student who was just knocking it out of the park. However, the trend continues. Tuesday, November 6th at 8:24 p.m., I got an email. Liam's para was being pulled from him the following day, and his new para will be with him. I had to pull my son out of bed and do my best to prepare him once again for this change. The reason Liam's para was removed was because a child in kindergarten needed a para as soon as possible, and once again, it was at the expense of my child. His IEP was not followed again. My son is once again struggling. We are having to use calming techniques on him that we used when he was first being diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. When there are such big changes at school, it turns our whole household upside down. Liam had no warning or time to prepare for this change at all. On top of that, his special ed teacher now has been teamed up with this kindergartner and has had a lot of subs in the classroom. This teacher is who gives Liam support and helps him with his reading. She is so crucial to his development and progress, and this teacher has a significant role in his writing of his IEP. It is very apparent that Brighton is struggling with paraprofessionals, struggling to hire paraprofessionals. But when you pay them such little money to do such a difficult job, what do you expect? Example, you couldn't get enough bus drivers in previous years, so you increased the pay not once, but twice. We haven't done this with paraprofessionals. Why? We all know the importance of the role they play, and elementary schools need more. I'm sick of hearing we have to do what's in the best interest of all students, because it's never been in the best interest of Liam. Why is a child not even in the same grade as my son having such an impact on his education? I want answers and a plan to address this issue. I also want to tell you guys about last year when Liam had his hair switched. He was having a very difficult day. It was over something so ridiculous I don't even remember. And he had a breakdown. And I don't know if you've ever seen a child with autism have a breakdown. They are gut-wrenching. Once he was able to calm down, he looked at me and said, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I control myself? Why does this keep happening?" And it's all because of these changes that keep happening to him, and he hasn't gotten a fair shot. So here we are again because of another student who struggles just a little bit harder. Well, no, the student struggles a lot harder than him, but it's now affecting my son. When does my son get his fair education? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the board this evening? Okay, that's going to close first call to the public. I want to thank all of you for coming this evening and sharing your concerns. We take them seriously. We don't discuss these items at the board table specifically. However, I can assure you we will have some further conversation and there will be some follow-up. So thank you. Thank you.
Do you need anything else from us?
No, and you are welcome to stay or you're welcome
We
to
gotta
go.
get kids to bed. So
Understand.
that's why I'm asking.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, that moves us into superintendent report, student representative.
We begin tonight with Gabrielle Myers.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. Some recent things that have been happening through the high school is the Project Unify team had a game on Saturday at Ford Field, which was very exciting, continuing to do amazing things with that club. Also, tomorrow, to add on to last week's thing, the leadership class has been invited at the St. Joseph Mercy Cancer Center, and they will give us all a tour of the facility, and they will show us where the money that we've donated has gone and will go, and kind of the basics of how they treat their patients, which is very exciting. We're very grateful for that experience. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Item B is bond update.
Yeah, I was asked to put bond update under superintendent report. I do have Mr. Heft and Mr. Lindau here, our architects, tonight. I also have the document with the updated application procedure. If the board wanted to discuss that tonight, I have enough copies to pass around. So the document that you're getting as it comes around is an updated version from the work session. So if you recall at the work session, we had went through the entire document and you had tried to reach consensus on a number of different items per school, per building, per area in the district, as well as some new additions to that. What you have in front of you tonight is a compilation of that discussion or that work session that night with the total amount obviously on the back page. We could go through page by page. You have received this already, but it shouldn't be much different than what we discussed at that particular night.
But this is the email that you sent,
Correct.
the latest email.
Yeah, the latest, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you go towards the back. I think it's process, or the very last, up is the very last page, it's landscape view. If you take a look at that, you can actually get the total breakdown, the amount proposed. If you look at the little box underneath to the left, it's also important to have the fees, the contingency, and the percentage that we'd have to carry for us to feel comfortable with the construction portion of it. When you look at the contingency estimation, got about 4.5% project contingency because nothing's designed is about 10. A&E, CM 7%, 1% respectively. Permits 0.5%, general liability 0.5%, fees 3%, general conditions about 7.5%. Anywhere typically between that, I would say 33 to 36% range is usually fairly comforting as you head into a possible bond. We sit at about 34%.
Is there a design contingency in here?
Right now, we have contingencies in both for the project and for estimated inflation. So really, it's just in the project contingency.
Okay. What percentage is that?
Should be around 2 to 3% at this point.
Okay.
What is A&E and CM?
A&E is your architectural, and CM is construction manager.
And I should clarify, the CM fees are really 3%. The others are the general conditions. It'll be probably under their, if you go that route, under their umbrella as far as testing permits and general liability and so forth. That all falls back under their purview.
So your CM percentage is in where?
Their fee is 3%.
Yeah, but where's that represented? Is that
That's
part of the AE fee, or where?
No, that's part of the CM. Actually, everything from CM on the left side.
All the way down?
All the way down, drop down. That would, if I was writing up the application for the state, that's why I put it all under. I might change a little bit, and take some of the general conditions and move those up too, because that's probably a little bit, could be maybe 5% or 6% versus 7.5%. At this stage of the game, I felt comfortable with that, and I would agree that 33 to 36 is the proper percentage. And you've probably seen that before.
Okay.
From a process standpoint, Dr. Gray, I think we still have some work we intended to do on refining some of the projects, particularly some of the STEAM projects, and what those would cover.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead. So the way we broke that down was we had a actual conceptual design of what we were going to do behind the high school, about 20,000+ square feet. You saw the renderings of that. We talked a little bit about usage. So once you total that up, I think it's about 5.7. And the board at the work session talked about $10 million total. We did a per pupil allotment for the remainder of that. So if you look at Scranton and Maltby, very similar in size, you take a dollar figure, you do a per pupil allotment. If you take the 4 elementaries, that's why they're all the same. So if you look at one and it's $357,143, the next one's the exact same, the next one, and the next one, and the next one, because the 4 elementaries are roughly the same size. I would suggest that that would probably be a redo of the makerspace or media center type location, or the computer lab directly off of that. That would really depend on meeting with our media specialists and design people and board committee to kind of fine tune that. But the way that those dollar figures were plugged into this document were based on a per pupil allotment. The high school was what it was, and then the rest of it was divided.
I got a question. I'd like to go back to the fee. Does that 7% include any type of specialty consultants?
It could, and it also include any fees as far as surveys, because obviously you have a lot of civil work, and soil drawings would also be in that, because that's something that it's a cost of the district. The way my contract can be written, it's reimbursable type thing, so you do a contract directly with them. But somewhere I have to put that number somewhere, and that's what I put in. So obviously, IDI is not getting 7%. That's not
correct. And so then that goes into, then I'm assuming the 1% of testing is construction.
Every construction testing, yes, and that's carried by the CM again.
So if we were to go out and, or you were to go out and procure a scout expert, that would be part of that 7%.
That would be the case, because I would be designing myself. I didn't send that expert. Very similar to a roof design, metal roof I did recently. I had another outside independent roofing consultant do it. Obviously, my time is not necessary, so I'm paying him.
Okay. And that's on the total? Or that's on the total
That's
construction?
7%, yep. I'm willing to work with that.
Okay.
And then go back and reinforce what Dr. Gray said. You had put $10 million, so it was a little bit difficult to say, okay, $5 million here, $4 million here, $3 million. I wasn't going to do that because we haven't talked and haven't gone through that design process. So a per pupil seemed to be the best way to go to proportionally keep it equal with all students. So that's where that came about, just to reinforce that.
And what part of that design process and thought process still needs to be done so that we have a clear view of what we're asking voters to pay for?
Yeah, what I would suggest is, once you settle on a dollar figure, if you choose to move forward, then we would meet with the people that actually run those programs in the buildings and bring in, I love the idea of a STEAM expert to come in and meet with them, generate ideas, and fall within the budget. So it would kind of be a backwards design where you have the budget and then you work through the budget with ideas that they'd have for makerspace or design. With the high school one, because that building is something separate, it's done almost the exact opposite. So you build the space based on what you think you're going to put in. In the inside one, you redesign the inside space based on the program you have and where you want to expand it to. That's how I see it.
Dr. Gray, I'll pass this on. This is from Dr. Mill. There's some suggestions there on just that topic. He's got to get you go through. Sorry about the print.
Yeah,
I apologize on that. But it's again, those kind of just what we're talking about. What we should have concerns about. My suggestion on this is that we make a motion to put this on for future action until we get support. And then we put on an agenda. And again, it's not the one for action, it could be on for future, and then potentially it could be on for action in the next board meeting if this board decides so.
And you're talking about the 53,884?
We're talking about as a superintendent wrote it.
I didn't write this. I delivered all the information to Scott and put it into the application.
This is your suggestion.
This is but this is a compilation of the workshop. So when we went through the workshop and you guys selected the items, we compiled that information and then this is the document we'd have to take to Treasury. So when we go to Treasury, Maria, myself, and Scott, and sit down with Treasury, we have to have a certain format for them to either approve or disapprove based on the parameters that Treasury sets. So the PowerPoint was all of your ideas. This document was after we went through the work session and whittled them down to what you see in front of you with actual numbers. Because if you remember when we left that night, we were kind of guessing on contingency, we were kind of guessing on final number. We were close, but we wanted to be as accurate as we possibly could. And that's what this represents.
I think, so we have a motion on the table, so do we have support?
Put it on for future. Now, if we put it on for future, that we can still move it a little bit. We should have some concerns about what things are being used for. Is that really accurate or is it something we have to keep in this phase?
So here's what I'd tell you. The more specificity we have, once you give us the nod to move towards Treasury, the better it is. So a per pupil allocation for now for STEAM centers in existing space works. If it was going to be new construction or added onto the building, I would not have a comfort level with that because it would change the dynamics of design. And the worst thing I think we could ever do is say we're going to build something and not come through with our word. So if you're talking about existing space like a media center or the computer labs or wherever, once we get in those buildings we look at and we take this CT, whatever, and we take this per pupil allocation and we generate ideas after that, I would say that's perfectly fine. Because now you're programming that room with obviously the reconstruction of it. Which would also, I would suggest, have to be spelled out very specifically in the ballot language.
But it would be a conservative approach to it's not adding brick and mortar because physically these buildings are large enough to handle the student population.
You couldn't add brick and mortar for that amount.
Correct.
I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
just under because the other thing too, the company is this, which you haven't seen yet, but you saw in the last bond application, is I have to go through each school and look at the teaching stations and inventory to see exactly what that number is, so that the state is comfortable with it. You're well over the 60% that you need to be.
Right.
But it also be telling as far as, well, gee, I'm over 110%, I got a problem. So then taking a STEM lab and making something a STEM lab, one would then have to approach it and say, you know, do we need to add on? But at the end of the, and the point I was hearing is that you do not need to add on, we had space in the building.
Well, in regards to, let's say, science labs, this would allow us to do the upgrades and we'll call it modernized science labs and things like that. So in the case if that's the need for that building, then that's what it could be used for. And that's legitimate use of it, correct? If that's what we decide the STEM center is, and that can cater the building.
Yeah,
It's an upgrade in science labs and maintained. Because my thought, again, is if we're by square footage large enough, the physical structure of the building is large enough, then really we're a tuning business here to tune it.
Sure.
And that then can be presented, accurately, and we're not adding more heat and more,
So here's how I'd answer that. Before, if you chose to move forward, before we went out and educated the public on this, I'd want to be crystal clear what we were educating them on. Because when you educate them for a vote, I think you have to be as refined as you possibly can so that people can make an accurate decision on what they want to do. So if it's science labs or STEAM centers or makerspace, I think we would have to really fine tune that so that if you chose to move forward, you could have an honest discussion about what it's going to be and what it's going to look like, and then people can make a decision.
I think we got to move to a point so we get to that point. So I don't have a problem with going on for the future and saying this is an active model, if I can get other support on that.
So we have a motion on the table, let's get through that and then we can.
Just so I'm clear, so the motion is to add to future action that we would essentially support this document being submitted to Treasury.
It'll tweak a little bit, but most of this will be accurate, yes.
And between now and then, before you do it for final, you're going to have these things worked out, where you got the details.
So the only clarification I have is, are you saying it's for future tonight, for action for your one meeting in December? Or are you saying for future action in December, and then the new board votes on it in the first meeting in January?
My request is you put it on for future tonight, so the option for a vote in December is available.
That just wasn't clear to me.
Putting it on for future action tonight doesn't obligate us to vote on it the next
Does not.
board meeting.
That's correct.
So it gives us the option to.
So do we have, is there support for?
That's for it.
Okay, so now that opens up discussion. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Which is good.
So now we have discussion. Okay.
My question is this, and thank you for getting us there. We had a number that we were going to exceed last time. We did on this. What is our process at this point? If all we're going to do is take it there and then that possible vote in December, do we have something in the middle here where we can all get together and discuss this some more, or what is the process of this? Because, or are we, that we're making that decision tonight that we're okay with this?
So actually, sorry, hold that thought, because I think the first question, Dr. Gray, would be, remind us of the calendaring process that we have to be at to put this on the ballot.
So the discussion that you guys talked about was a November 2019 vote that avoids paying for a special election and avoids some of those things that aren't beneficial to the bottom line for us. If you're voting in November, June would be your treasury date at the latest, which would be easy to get right now. We'd probably look the end of May, probably, I would guess, instead of June. And then, after that, there's not a ton of pieces in place prior to the actual vote. Create the ballot language, get your ballot language certified, and then you put it on for a vote.
So I'm hearing June is where.
The latest for a treasury date, yeah.
Okay.
And at what point do we have to have the application finalized for that treasury meeting?
Just by the time we go, we'd submitted a little before we went, but.
I'd like a little time to put it together. But, no, thank you. The attorney requires it 3 days prior to that, so I have to give it to them. But I could use a couple of weeks to finalize and put it together, but you're very early now in the process. What's most important is coming up with total amount and what that list includes. And that's what you're in the process of doing. The other is all backup type material and so forth. So from that standpoint, you're correct that, you know, if you figured, I'll just throw a day out there, mid-May, if you knew and had it finalized, I could then throw the rest of it together and it'd be ready.
You're not gonna have significant changes
No.
from here, so we've worked
I don't think so.
a great deal on this document, so tweaking the document or leaving it as it is would be something we can do.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I know that we have put a lot of work into this process, you know, because we've been talking about what we would like to do with a potential bond offering for almost a year now. If you count in all of the committee work that was done last year as we considered a November 18th ballot. And, you know, I don't know that we have a ton more work to do, but as Ken said, the final number, once you add in the contingencies, is not quite where we had talked about putting it. And it's not quite where I am yet comfortable with. So I like the idea of having this on for future action because that forces us to give the work attention at the board table. We do. And I think that's important as we prepare to put this in front of the public, that we sit here at the board table and talk through some of these. And I would suggest that maybe we pick a couple of the larger dollar projects and plan to devote some time to going through what's included in there, what are our current estimates, and making sure that we as a board are comfortable with what's included in those projects, because that's how we decide if we're happy with the number. Are we getting what we think we should get for the money or not? At least from my perspective, that's how it goes.
Mr. President. I'm not so sure, Alicia, it's as simple as just taking the largest projects and maybe going from there, because I think there's a lot of projects and there's a lot of different things that make up the total amount at the end of the day. So, in trying to move this forward, and I think and again, going back to try to recall, the number was what, 45, 50, somewhere in there, right? So roughly 3 million over somewhere, but again, these are all in with all the fees. So, you know, do we go back and do we, as each person, what I'm trying not to do is to belabor the process. Maybe each one of us takes a look at the application and says, hey, you know, if it's a goal of $3 million, where do you think we could find the $3 million? Because everything's spelled out in the application, right? Maybe you take $1 million out of the STEM, maybe you take $1 million out of something else, or whatever, however it works, okay? And again, and maybe we try to collect it that way, or we go back and we sit back in a room again for a couple hours and we hash back through it again to try to reduce it $3 million, whichever would be more comfortable in trying to get it. I think our biggest issue is to get to that number, right? And the sooner we can get to that and that we can all feel good about that number, I think it behooves everyone moving forward. So, what is that, if that's what we want to do?
Right. You're coming at it from a slightly different angle than I am, but I think you're saying exactly the same thing. We need to finish the rest of the work. We need to do it in a judicious way, but not continue to belabor the point and drag it out longer than it has to be.
Because just because we have till May, I don't think we should take that.
I agree. I agree.
My thought process on this is that we're going to have to, and I think everybody's sincerity here is there, but you know, as you bring it to the public, if it's 48 million, if it's 52 million, if you're trusted with either one of those numbers, you're going to have that same trust. The key is to have enough impact to substantiate the concepts. You're going to really, you know, the tax rate's not going to change. The 48 to 52 million isn't going to change the tax rate. It's not going to change anything. It's a number. And because of the requests throughout the board from different areas, some for mechanical maintenance, and in my case, you know, I've been pushing STEM since forever, 16 years now, 8 years as a board member, and 8 years before that. So, and I feel very comfortable that we're looking at that seriously. Improving in that area, in all of them, much as others, those things will get worked out. So that's the sincerity, I think, that the board needs to present. So the number is relative, it's important, but not the final decision. The final decision is what are you going to get and what are you trying to produce for your students. And that will be, it's going to be a tough thing. You know, we know what's happening right now in industry and markets and things that even happen today, you know, could affect things in November next year. We don't know yet. Michigan's going to be affected by what was decided today. So we have to roll dice a little bit on that. But again, coming back to the voters with a program that shows, and I'll just put it how I see it, the success of Brighton area schools, and mind you, my support, lack of support at the beginning for the initial one, because I support a different concept. But looking at what's happened here and what's happened for our students, it makes sense to look at this very seriously. And continuing that progress is really what everybody's interested in, I think, from the board side, so whether they agree or disagree on different issues or topics. I don't think anybody disagrees on that topic. Leave it better than we found it. Continue to see progress. Our superintendent has brought some ideas. We've brought our ideas, and this is kind of a reasonable, we're not asking for double this or triple. I mean, we could be tearing down buildings and trying to build new space centers, and we're not trying to do that right now. There may be a time when it comes. We don't know that. But right now, this is a continuation of a project that the superintendent thinks will work for 10 years now as well, correct? So this is what his view was initially, and we talked about it. I think the leadership part's there without any question. So it's up to the board how they present it to the public. And the public may or may not, again, like I said, I think that we're offering these opportunities for students to continue to look at a balance between making sure the heat works and continuing to add opportunities for students is what we're up to. And I've been, like I said, it's been a good run, so they could be part of seeing such good growth here. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, Chesney?
Just a couple of questions. One is, did I understand an earlier statement that considerations associated with new construction are different than the considerations associated with remodel? In what way? I have two questions. That's the first one.
The dollar amount's higher for new construction than it is for a remodel. So if you're gonna redo the media centers for makerspace and the computer labs that fall off those, you're not talking about actual construction, you're talking about refurbishing, redoing, you're talking about equipment as well, loose equipment. And so that dollar figure would go further than it would if you were digging into the ground attaching to the building.
Okay. But that's, I understand that part of it. But the question is, does one get more scrutiny then?
Yeah. With the state, you mentioned.
With the state.
I heard
state
it
level
mentioned.
construction.
No.
Okay, I thought I heard that earlier.
I thought it was too.
No. You know, what the state looks at typically is the projects, our enrollment, the addition, if we're adding any, or the reconstruction of the existing space, if it falls in their parameters. For instance, a good example would be can't paint anything with bond dollars. You know, you have to follow their rules. But other than that, it's pretty much left up to local boards and their committees and the administration to enact the bond itself.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Please.
That was the first of two.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The second one is, and this is related to kind of the level of detail such that, you know, that I could feel personally that I could defend these on a line item basis, right? And that's the level of detail that I'd like to have as a board member, to be able, if someone asks me, what does that mean? Okay, and as an example, and this is important, it's like, you know, all that I've done my whole professional life is STEAM. And I see a line item that says STEAM renovations, and I say, yes, I'm all for that. And then it's $1.32 million. And I have no idea what I could say in terms of even describing what it is, besides the fact that I'm intuitively for it because I'm all about STEAM. So how do we, as board members, get enough detail at a line item level that we can defend this?
You generate it. So again, the original STEAM addition to the bond was about $5 million, and it was very identified. It was a new structure attached to the back of the high school, and the concept of what it was going to look like and what was going to be housed inside of it, crystal clear.
Yep.
You guys at the session generated a $10 million STEAM need without any additional information to us in terms of the specificity of the projects. So for us then, what we do is we per pupil allocate it, and then it would be our job moving forward with this to meet with a STEAM expert or whomever in the district, as well as the media center specialists, because they, especially at the younger levels, do a lot of this work and generate the ideas that fit within that. Take, for instance, the 1.2 million you're talking about. You could spend that in a day on STEAM stuff. You could spend it in a year on STEAM stuff. It depends on your priorities. So that's why you typically have subcommittees for bonds once they go through, because the subcommittee then takes a look at the dollar figures, the conceptual framework that we've all decided upon, and fits itself into it. I'll give you a great example. In my opinion, the last bond we had about 17 million in technology, right? So we originally started with half Dell, half Apple type situations, but found as we progressed through the bond that Chromebooks were a better answer for us, right? So our specialized committee of experts found a better way, and it still fit within the identification of the board and what they wanted to see happen, cutting edge technology. We want cutting edge STEAM. What that means today is going to be different than in a year from now, because remember, if you go for it and it passes in November, a shovel's not going to touch the ground until May or June. Okay, and so that year and a half is a long period of time for things to change, and maybe a new concept comes out that fills the need. What you're doing is you're saying STEAM is important enough to us that we're going to allocate on a per pupil basis to these buildings, and then let our committees figure out what that means to push this concept forward in our district. That's the best way I can answer.
And you can sign up for one of the committees when you're retired. That'd be great, actually.
Mr. Stahl.
So we did a doodle poll for our January board workshop, and we don't have this on that for a topic, and find it first, but is that something we could do? Throw it out there.
I would say that agenda is pretty full.
Can I make a suggestion on that? What worked really well with the last 88 million was everybody up here has different skill sets, right? And within the organization, outside of the organization, we have people with different skill sets. So we set up committees where we need your help. So Dr. Chesney, obviously you'd be a prime candidate for the STEAM committee, okay? Sean was a prime candidate for the construction committee, because that's what he does, and so on and so on. And so all of those pieces, you'd look for a way to help be a part of that, and you become a committee member and have influence, and we bring in outside people. And again, construction managers and architects design and do what we tell them to do. And the better, more clear feedback that we can give to them, the less money and time we waste. At least that's what I've seen from doing it. If we come in and are too broad in our focus, they don't know what to design, they come back to us 3 or 4 times, and that adds up to dollars. So I like to do the work up front and then give them a very, very specific set of instructions on what they're going to design. Otherwise, by nature, they're left-brain creative people. They'll design the world, and it won't fit within our budget. No offense to them, but that's just how it works. In my opinion.
I'd like to call a vote.
So let me summarize real quick. Then
I call the vote. You can summarize after.
Well,
because that's
summarize
procedure.
real quick.
But I'd like to be summarized, because I'm not so necessarily
I'll
clear
hold
on
I'll
this.
hold the call. I'll hold the call.
Thank you.
You're welcome. He's not fair.
So, right, what I'm hearing is, and that what the motion is for would be to move this bond item, the bond onto for future action. There is still some work to be done in terms of vetting out where our comfort level is on total cost. It is higher than what we had agreed to for the last working session. And that by having it on the agenda and for future action, we can continue to discuss at upcoming board meetings and further vet out what we need to do with respects to whether we're going to cut anything out of the current proposal, refine anything from the current proposal,
or move with the current proposal forward? I'm thinking it'd be on for D tonight.
On to tonight's for future.
A clarification for me then, when we build the next agenda, D moves up to for action. Is that accurate? So if it's put on us for future action tonight, the typical process would be it goes for action the next one, but we, again,
We gotta agree on an amount of money.
that's what I'm saying.
We're gonna do that when we get down here in the future. I think we're really.
I think we're voting on an amendment to tonight's agenda and an expectation for what is going to be on the agenda at our next meeting. But what's on the agenda doesn't mean that we take a final vote, because one of us can certainly move to table the issue if we don't feel comfortable voting next time.
Well, that was kind of my question, why are we even voting in the first place? Because if we want to carry it for, again, for future, we can continue to carry it for future. It doesn't make any difference. What I would get to and what I would vote on would be that amount, an amount of money at the end of the day.
That could be.
I'm good with that. You know, if you wanted to vote on the 53 million, and that's how you proposed the motion, I would vote on that 53 million. But again, if there's somewhere along the line where it's 50 million or something like that that other people would like to see.
But here's my motion. My motion is to move it on for future action for tonight, D, for discussion on that amount of money.
On 53 million.
On 53 million. We can discuss it tonight, and if that's the favor of the board, then it would go on for action. But the idea is I'd like to keep it on this topic. There's no reason we can't work through it and make it happen. So whatever that number is, like I said, I don't care if it's 48 or 50. It doesn't change the taxes. It just is a perception as long as it doesn't work.
Well, then, why don't we vote on 50 million and agree on 50 million?
Well, Dr. Gistinger, just because it's a burning question for me, the difference between 50 and 53 million, you might not know it exactly off the top of your head, would be an extension of how many years?
It would be very insignificant.
Yeah, 6 months.
Okay.
I mean, it's not noticeable.
But the payment to the taxpayers is the same, so it's going to be the level term. The
7.19.
Yeah, 7.19 million.
Remember what we said before was, this is an extension, yeah, you could do 265 or whatever, but I just want everybody to be clear, so it says that we didn't talk about it. If originally it was 45 and now it's 53, or we're at 50 to 53, what's the difference in that? And it sounds like it's a year or less. So what that means is, if we were going to extend this 2 or 3 years, that's the 7.19 mils, it would be 4, or something along those lines, instead of the 3. And then you could look again to see that rate drop if house values stay and all that kind of stuff.
So if 53 million is a 6-month extension, then 47 million would be 6 months less.
Correct.
Originally.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense, yes.
Okay.
Those are all approximates.
Okay, so the motion in summary at this point is that this item, bond item, moves to item D for future action on tonight's agenda. Okay.
The way it reads now.
As it says, and it's going to be amended or touched up at that time, if it needs to be.
And then are we going to open it up again for future action?
Yes.
And have an open discussion about this?
That was my intention.
Is that it will not be on for action in the next?
No, we will go on for action, bring it up right now for future.
Yeah.
And if the board decides that we're going to go for action, you get the number set.
I think what Dr. Chesney was saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was asking if when we get down to D tonight, if we were going to have another discussion.
Yes.
I was thinking that because it puts it in that category, that we can discuss the amount of money, and we take it out of it right now, we're under the bond update, and that was my intention, was to, or you can do it right now. I'm good with saying the 53 is what.
So let's, at this point, let's vote.
Before we do this, I mean, the whole point of putting things in for future action is to get us time to pre-process and look over the information.
We've got a lot of action to
For future action tonight, then we're negating that.
You can say no. You can say no.
No, what I'm hearing, I'm just saying what I'm hearing from the board is that when we get to, the vote you're taking right now is to put it as a for future item tonight, as letter D. And then when we get through A through I and for action, A, B, C, we're done talking about those, we get to D, you could have another discussion tonight related to the bond and, you know, debate the number or whatever you want to do, but there's no vote as a for action item tonight. That's what I'm hearing. Is that accurate?
Okay.
Okay.
That's correct.
So you want a roll call vote?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Ackerman.
Mr. Stahl?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes?
Mr. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
Yep.
Dr. Chesney?
No.
Mr. Birchfield?
Yes.
So this will go on as D tonight. Got it.
All right, item C, superintendent evaluation. So we're at that time again in the year for the superintendent evaluation is, this board recalls, we have the opportunity, because Dr. Gray has had 3 consecutive years of highly effective, that we don't have to formally complete an evaluation. That is the recommendation for this particular year, would be to do that. With the intent that starting in the January 9th, or whatever date, actually, is it the January 9th, is that what we settle on for workshop? I don't know yet.
Oh, for the workshop,
Yeah.
the 9th and the 30th.
That we will be spending, allocating time with the new board on superintendent administration expectations, as well as it's one of the topical areas to set the priorities for the next coming year. I'll present that to the board, get reaction. The other alternative certainly would be to complete the formal evaluation between now and the end of the year, which we can do.
So is this a vote, or is this a resolution, or is this a yay or nay, or what are we doing?
A little bit more informal than a formal vote, I think, but just feedback from the board as to what preference is.
Yeah.
So play again. If superintendent has,
Any teacher administrator.
teacher administrator has
3.
3 years of highly effective, then they can skip a year, or they can skip forevermore.
A year.
They can skip a year. So basically, then that would force an evaluation at the end of 2019.
Correct.
Okay. And then if there was a highly effective then again, you could skip a year. I mean, that's what the process is. 3 highly effectives in a row, you get to skip a year.
Yep.
Okay.
Feedback?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good with just skipping.
Okay.
Agreed.
I think it makes a lot of sense to give us time to look at what we want priorities to be and to work through that with the administration, and then ask Dr. Gray and the board to consider how we did with that by the end of the year next year, instead of trying to pull off an evaluation in the next month and a half when we aren't required to do it. It makes more sense to take our time with it and do something thoughtful.
Okay. So I think we have consensus there, and we'll move forward with the.
And I think it's fair just for the incoming board members to understand that it would make no sense for them to be part of the evaluation this year, because just as we've all experienced, what do you evaluate on, because you haven't sat up here to really do that. So it's.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Mr. Trombley, and I know we have one future board member in the room, and not to put. Oh, are they both here? Is Laura? Hi, Laura. Sorry. Every one of us has been put in that same position coming onto the board, is immediately in January, having to do a performance evaluation on somebody that we hadn't been closely associated with. So I completely agree, and that's what we're trying to change in some of this process.
This is still for discussion.
Yes, you back?
Oh, yeah, I am. Yeah, sometimes you don't get break. Oh, well, we can just do the evaluation right now, can't we? Because he doesn't need one? You don't need an evaluation?
That's what
we just listen?
Just you said an evaluation?
We talk all the time, so. Don't worry. You guys stay.
So then, so.
None of you are free to call.
So then we should, so we can do a polling. Mr. Trombley, you're okay with superintendent?
We just went through that.
Everybody's good with it?
So
Everybody-
You're the only one that has a comment.
Also, you all commented how great he was and wonderful and all these things, and you had no complaints. He always answers your call.
No, we're not doing a formal evaluation. This,
How's he supposed to get a raise?
that's a separate conversation.
Oh.
All right, first one in here.
Okay, moving on into for action. Item A, regular meeting minutes of November 12th, 2018. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Chesney, supported by Ms. Reed. Any discussion?
Okay, I think one correction. On item 11, that President Birchfield noted the next meeting is a board workshop scheduled for Monday, November 26th. Regular board meeting.
I might have actually said that too. I don't know. It's corrected now. Okay, anything else? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item B, donation first Lego. Dr. Gray.
We recommend you accept the donation of $1,000 from D.E. McNabb for its first Lego with appreciation under our board policy 7230.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Moved by Mr. Myers, supported by Mr. Conley. Any discussion?
Oh, we have an opportunity in, what's the date in December, the grade school kid in the high school at the first?
Right around there.
I mean, to check your calendars, but they're going to have like a regional tournament. It grew from last year's exploratory to a full-blown deal at Brighton High School, so maybe, Sarah, could you get an email out to the board members of that tournament and the dates? It's a big opportunity for Brighton area schools to host that. And bring a lot of schools, and I was able to go last year, so it's a cool thing about it. So thank you.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item C, school of choice, second semester.
Again, we recommend you offer limited school of choice in grades 1 through 12 only. Again, the parameters that we talked about last time would be, under this provision, you only have to take one per grade. In terms of that, or you can take more, it's generally just backfills open slots for us, and we're very careful about balancing those.
Okay, do we have a motion? Motion by Mr. Stahl. Support by Mr. Myers. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? 7-0. Item D, Neola policy, second reading.
You received your cheat sheet from Dr. Turner prior to this board meeting. I'm not sure, I don't believe any of you reached out to him in terms of questions, so we would recommend as is, based on the explanations that he sent you.
Do we have a motion? Moved by Mr. Trombley, supported by Mr. Stahl. Any discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Conley.
Under board policies, and if there's a violation, Dr. Gray, is the board responsible to be the legal authority in deciding these things? Who decides?
That's what you pay me to do.
You make that decision, and then they would come back before the board?
Not always, no.
You can't.
Depends on what it is. If it's a discipline situation of an employee, there are parameters set in board policy that discuss that. If it's a general violation, we would typically work through that.
And right now, I'm thinking of resources and things that were, how do I go outside or go through the superintendent?
Or a particular, let's say it's an athletic issue, would go through the athletic director. Let's say it's an operational issue, would go through our operations director. Financial one, Dr. Castillo and on.
So what is the transparency in that to the board? How does the board know if there's
I
activity?
typically send you information related to that.
So the board would be informed. Thank you.
Dr. Chesney.
I have a bunch of questions on this. On page 10 of the packet, it says, there's a cross out of lending of district-owned equipment and change to lending of board-owned equipment. Does this imply that the equipment in Brighton area schools is owned by the board, or does this imply that equipment given to us as we're serving on the board, this is the policy that governs that equipment?
So the strike-throughs that you see are from policy company, they're not ours. So typically, when you see a strike-through within the paragraph, it's based on a court case or something they've run across that has changed a definition or a title. So my guess would be that based on some kind of litigation, not here, but in some particular place, that the word district was challenged, and that the word board was the one that was accepted. And that's why it's recommended by the policy company. That's my guess.
So I would understand that, but then my question goes back to, does this imply that I can't lend out that projector that's mounted to the ceiling? Or does this imply that if the school district gave me an iPad to use in this meeting, I couldn't lend it to someone else?
No, it would be the first.
The first.
Yes.
So that implies then that all technology within the school district is essentially owned by the board?
So the board would, yeah, the board, it's calling you the owner because then it goes back to somebody, and the board creates policy for these lending of equipment. So if we're going to lend equipment out, you guys, through me, establish policy. That's why we have a policy committee and a company that comes in to do it. And so my guess, again, because I don't know the court case that changed it from district to board, was somebody challenged that a district is just an entity, it couldn't own anything, so the people responsible had to be that, and the people responsible are probably the board. So, again,
It's not probably,
I guess
it's actually the board's responsible for everything. Yeah. Everything else, so I think it's accurate. It's where it belongs, actually.
I think it's, I mean, I somewhat agree and somewhat disagree, because, and I would point out the fact that if you look at this particular policy that deals with board property, and you compare that to, if you go to the blue highlighted, that's the office of the superintendent. And it talks about the use of the technology and equipment from the office of the superintendent, and it specifically refers to it as district property. Whereas this particular policy that we're looking at right now, the one on page 10,
Yep. Dr.
Chesney, this is a Board of Education. If you look at the top left, it's office superintendent, and then this one's board. So this deals with board, what is the technology for board-owned equipment. And so there are some nuances that are different with this versus the office of superintendent and any reference to district-owned property. So it's a subtle difference, but there is a little bit of a difference.
So there is a difference?
Yes,
So
that's what I believe.
So that is a district-owned projector. I can't lend that out. I have no equipment that is given to me as a board.
I don't know that I have the answer to that question. I think this is just in terms of how, if there's one, there obviously is a policy that differentiates between board-owned equipment versus district-owned equipment. I don't know that within Brighton area schools, I don't know that we've made that differentiation. I think it's beyond the scope of what was asked to be updated with the Neola policy. I'm just pointing out that I think that's the difference between the two different policies and why this one's worded the way it is versus the blue one for the office of the superintendent being worded in reference to district-owned equipment. Maybe that's a discussion we should have. Do we have board-owned equipment? I don't know the answer to that question. But
yeah, can someone tell me one piece of board-owned equipment?
Well, in some districts, board members have laptops, or they have board books on iPads that they bring to board meetings. So that would be deemed a board-owned piece of equipment.
But I guess I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. If there are references to board-owned and district-owned property in the policies, do we understand why those are different, and do we have those differences defined someplace? And I don't remember seeing that in this set of policies, but I won't pretend to know them backwards and forwards. So, do you think it's someplace else, Dr.
I'm
Gray?
sure it is, yeah. I wouldn't
Because that's-
Not if I have to go to the green next week, that was important.
Right. Well, and the other concern that I still have with these policies, and I appreciate the cheat sheet, but, you know, if we're just looking on page 10, the one that we're talking through now, you know, the 2 paragraphs at the top that spent the most time talking about board-owned equipment versus district-owned equipment, we haven't checked the box for either of those paragraphs. So my understanding of the way this works, we're not actually using that language in our policy. Our policy starts with the board may lend specific items of equipment on the written request of the user and approval granted by the superintendent.
Correct.
And there's another small paragraph after that, but everything else on that page we are not using.
That's right.
So, following up on that, Ms. Reed, and just moving on to page 27. Now, I look at page 27, and I have no idea what I'm voting on. There's boxes, some are checked, and then there's a squiggly through them all. And I don't know what that means. I honestly, in terms of...
Did we just get this, or is this something around for a while?
Yeah, so this is the same point that I brought up at the last meeting.
Did you look at the cheat sheet we sent you?
I did, and it doesn't tell me about this specific thing that I'm voting on page 27. I mean, I'm not voting on the cheat sheet, I'm voting on this, and that's policy 7543, page 3 of 6. Option 1, initially selected and subsequently canceled via strike through. Okay, so that is all gone.
Correct.
So everything on that is gone. Okay. And then option 2, which is on the next page, there's a bunch of cross-outs and a bunch of checks. And what we are deciding is everything else, we're choosing option 2, the ones that were checked and crossed out, we're not voting on those, and so the only one that's left that's not crossed out but is checked is district employees, so that's the right answer?
Correct.
Okay.
So, what that means for this policy, we're left with a policy that says district employees are permitted to use their personally owned or district-owned computers or workstations to remotely access the district server, but we have crossed off students, so our students can't access their Google accounts anymore. And we have crossed off contractors and vendors and agents, so we can't hire people to perform security reviews or anything else and have them remotely access.
And we've crossed out board members, so we can't read our minutes from home.
Here's my suggestion.
Or our email on our personal device.
I would say table this, and if you have specific questions, if you want to set a time, we'll have Dr. Turner sit down, because Dr. Turner, as he manages this, runs through all this and how he has to manage the system in terms of that. So if he wrote a cheat sheet, but obviously it didn't answer all of your questions, so we could either call him or we could meet with him separately, because these aren't dying to go into place. I mean, they could wait a little bit longer, and it's the same with all of it. That's, you know, why we talked about him writing the cheat sheet. If you have questions, you can call him. But I would suggest if people have additional questions, let's set a time, come in, we'll go page by page if you feel more comfortable with that process.
First, you're ready to make a motion to table this. Yep.
Support.
Okay. I don't think we have to vote on the table.
All right, item E, summer tax collection. We have a Dr. Gray.
Dr. Gasinger?
Yes, you have in your packet the annual resolution to collect 100% of our operating tax in the summer. And I have not received any questions about this.
We have a motion, moved by Mr. Stahl, supported by Mr. Myers. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item F, relinquish federal funds.
If you recall last time, Ms. Mosier talked a great deal about I think it's $262 or something like that, and our ability to do that without using that, the actual paperwork, and that is it's going to cost us more to generate the $262 than it would be worth, so we'll just supplement it on our own.
Do we have a motion? So moved. Moved by Mr. Stahl, supported by Ms. Reed. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? That passes 7-0. Item G, certified staff resignation. Dr. Gray.
We recommend that you accept the resignation of Mindy Halligan, former special education teacher at Multi Intermediate.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Chesney. Support. Supported by Mr. Stahl. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item H, overseas field trip, Paris.
We recommend that you approve the overseas request trip to Paris, recommended for the Brighton Choir to go to Paris, March, April of 2020.
Do we have a motion? So moved. Moved by Mr. Myers, supported by Mr. Connolly. Any discussion?
What is our approximate student count?
Small, do you remember? I think it's in the packet.
It's in the packet.
For discussion.
It says 35 to 40 students.
How many?
35 to 40 students.
Okay, thank you.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Item I, still throws me, overseas field trip, Hawaii.
Yeah. Again, we request that you approve the overseas trip to Honolulu, Hawaii for 2020, the Pearl Harbor Memorial Parade. On another note, I don't know if you saw them in the Thanksgiving Day Parade, but they were phenomenal down there, just on a side note, so congratulations to them. But again, another great opportunity that we were approached and asked to be a part of.
Do we have a motion? So moved. Motion by Mr. Connolly, supported by Mr. Stahl. Any discussion?
Same question. What's the approximate number of students?
Could be up to 260 students, depending if they have.
I didn't see one on that one. And again, for students that have a hardship, there's going to be fundraisers. I saw that.
That's why they're asking for it early to get in time, and also to help.
We need to obviously get on that early as possible, because that's a big commitment. It is. Some of our students. Celebration, though.
Were they taking buses?
Yeah. To the airport.
It's a long trip. 13 hours.
Yeah, if you need me to chaperone,
Those are some special buses.
I'll do it.
It's a great recruiting tool. I know a whole lot of 8th graders that are definitely going to be in marching band next year.
All right, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 7-0. Okay, that closes out for action items and takes us into for future action. Item A is disposal of property. Dr. Gray.
Pictures on the back side of this particular page, but per board policy 7310, you will see 70 student desks that have been, used as much as we possibly can, and any parts that were useful keeping, we've already taken off these, so it's time for these to go.
Any questions? Item B, donation, Pink Week.
If you recall, we had a pretty moving presentation last board meeting about our Pink Week fundraising opportunity. This tonight is to accept a donation of $14,910.16. And you can see how that's split out down at the bottom again. You probably remember it was $45,000, but anything over $1,000 from individual pieces has to come in front of you. So that's why you have it this way tonight.
Any discussion or questions?
So this is part of the 45,000,
That's
not
correct.
in addition to it.
That's correct.
And then what is Ivory Vines? What is that? We know they have a donation population of 12,282.
That is Michelle,
Latundra.
You know how to pronounce her last name?
Latundra.
Yeah, that's her comment.
And Michelle Latundra is
PTO parent.
PTO parent? Okay. And what does Ivy Vines do?
I think they do t-shirts. I think this is the t-shirt sales, so the portion of the t-shirt sales.
This,
that's coming back to us.
Maltby created their own, designed their own t-shirt this year. That's the sales just from that t-shirt at Maltby.
Deal with PTO ducket.
It's a lot of t-shirts.
A lot of t-shirts.
Very cool. Okay, item C, JROTC program. Ms. Mosier, is that your item or Dr. Gray?
I can take it, or she can take it either way. We've obviously finished the survey. We're ready to launch. We were going to launch prior to Thanksgiving, but it wouldn't get obviously the movement as people aren't paying attention to emails from us. So we could launch it as early as tomorrow. That's kind of what we were asked to do with the last one in terms of gaining feedback. As far as programming, we have had some comments from people in relation to it. As far as the curriculum guide itself, it would be like one of those classes that we put in the guide, but presently run or don't run. It just depends on who signs up.
We're waiting for the results of the poll also. If it gets out there.
Tomorrow, plan to be launched tomorrow.
And then what I'd like to do is move this up for action, and then the results, if they're in, we can get the vote on it, and if the results are tabling results, then you guys can table it and move forward. But I did bring up with optimism, I brought the textbooks, so I'll take them down to the chief of curriculum here, and she can look these over.
Remember too that we've only talked about JROTC as far as the survey, but the survey includes the other classes we talked about as well. So it's a conglomerate of all those pieces, the languages and the programming and all that we talked about.
What languages are in there?
I don't remember the specifics.
So there's Arabic, Mandarin, Chinese, and then it has other, and it gives you an option if there was a different language. And then one of the other things that was requested was that if there's anything that somebody else might want, that is an option for them to list that as well, if there's something else that might be of
My
interest.
concern
Is
is
programming languages in there too?
Computer programming is in there as well.
this coding. So the discussion as we left it last was to have, I think, a Mandarin opportunity, and then also offer for the junior ROTC, and then coding. So how did that change? That we added more languages and we added different things?
It is not different from the first one.
Pardon?
It is no different from the first
Oh,
survey.
we had it all in there? We had.
Yes.
Yeah.
We haven't changed that.
Arabic was in the first one. All right, good. So that's gonna go tomorrow. So, that's what I'd like to see happen, though, is that goes up for action again. You don't have the results that you need, but I think you will. And what are the results that we need? That's the other question. If we make
I think that's the $1 million question.
what are the results that the board's gonna be comfortable getting on any of these topics to move it on to the scheduling part of it. What was it you need to think about?
So one of the first things I would make sure is that we get enough people responding to the survey to make sure it's a valid survey. So you want at least 20% of your parent population approximately to respond to that. And then obviously your student population is a different number. And that would let you know that you're getting at least a good rate of sampling. That would be the first step.
And then I think the decision you need to make after that is if you want it in the curriculum guide, all of it, one of it, 5 of it, whatever, you put it in the curriculum guide, and then if people select it, they select it. If they don't, they don't. Remember, our curriculum guide right now is that thick, but we run that much of it because we have a certain number of kids, they have a certain number of hours, and they pick a certain number of classes. So there are hosts of classes that we don't run each year because they don't get enough people in them. We have had some kids take some of these languages we were talking about, most of them through an online experience.
I was gonna say, how many?
I don't know, year to year, how many take Mandarin, Henry?
We had maybe half a dozen take over the last few years.
Programming has become more popular.
Programming has become very popular.
Very popular. That class.
Right now, we don't offer that online?
No.
No, programming is Michelle Costa.
And we're offering a new, looking at a new programming class next year as well.
Yeah. And are those classes at capacity then? So we're adding additional classes, so we're filling?
I think, Dr. Tessie may know more, I think it's the next level of it, Mr. Conlon, because our students, they take a different one online that we don't offer, so we're trying to make our program better.
There's two different CS AP courses. One of them is CS AP Principles, and that's what's known as computer science that everybody should know. And then there's computer science programming languages. And the one that we're doing a sample of this year kind of uses the STEELS program, which is a program offered by Microsoft. And then during the next academic year, we'll have the other CS AP classes. The TEALS program this year is the pilot.
So do we need to vote to have this put in the curriculum guide?
You typically don't.
I didn't think
That's
so.
not our typical process.
Is it any different because we would be talking about new staff with different training of the folks that we have now and an additional spend for new
I
materials?
think again, what like Dr. Suri's done in the past and what she'll do as we move forward, the curriculum department typically brings the recommendations and if there's dollar figures attached to it. Prime example of that would have been the science curriculum, obviously. They brought that because there was a large spend in relation to that. And we've accumulated 2 more coaches for the implementation science. So obviously that was that part of the discussion. So I think this is just a different form of that type of discussion with language and ROTC and programming.
Does that mean, again though, let's say the board adapted the ROTC program, said let's do it right now. Does that mean other programs are going to fold? It does, technically.
Well, I don't think I can answer that question until people sign up.
No, I'm just saying, let's just say.
Let's say 100 kids took it?
Yeah.
Yes. Because those 100 kids would be out of some other classes that they're
So
present.
there's no way to make this.
But that happens every year.
I understand, but there's no way to make this the zero. Again, I've been told for years that they negotiated 0 hour or 7th hour opportunity though, where the students can keep their main curriculum and still be able to do this. There's no possible way to do this program.
You could run a 0 hour. I don't know the time. I don't know if it's a 1 hour class a day. I thought it was 2.
I'm not a JROTC expert.
We may need to do that.
So if it's a 0 hour, we do run those. Typically, what we run 0 hours for, and what because again, it's based on kids signing up, is we'll run classes that are typically mandated in the 18 of the 20 classes. We run history. We run
Civics, econ, world history, U.S. history.
That means during the day then, those kids get another crack at an elective typically. Because if you have a band choir kid, very difficult for them to meet all the other 18 requirements. So we offer the 0 hour for the civics or government or whatever that eat up the rest of those credits and then they can do that. We used to offer 7th, nobody takes it because our kids are typically involved in a lot of stuff after school. We get way more people that sign up for a 0 hour than anybody that comes in and asks for a 7th. We just don't get it.
Well, again, that sounds like a potential successful way to do it in a way, because then it would be, if it is a 2 hour block, then it may be a security, but it may be an hour, I don't know. So we don't have that answer tonight.
2 hour, I don't think you could run a 2 hour block before school because 0 hour starts at 6:25. You could do 0 hour first, or what would more likely happen, Mr. Connolly, is again they would take a civics or something else that fulfills a requirement so they could fit the 2 hours. Prime example would be those people that take the 2 hour auto shop or the 2 hour class, CAD design or whatever. That's why they take the 0 hour because it frees up their schedule because they get that block.
That's how I like to kind of look at the quoting of how people would fit it in, because again, this is going to be an opportunity and it could evolve to a larger opportunity, but it has to start. So that's just an idea.
I would suggest, I mean, if we're truly considering this program, if it were to run being a 0 hour or a 7 hour, we probably should include that in the survey to get more accuracy in what the appetite is.
Well, I would just say is that an option. But you don't say it has to be done that way, but would that be an idea that they would support? You got all these other ideas on there. I mean, that would be, I think that makes sense, actually. We agree with you.
See, there was value in it not going down quite yet. Did that?
That's true. But I'd like to see that in considered action, and if it comes back, you don't have enough people surveyed, we don't have enough people surveyed, and then you can wait until the survey results come in. But if it comes in heavy, and it's enough to make it happen, then the board can decide if they're gonna support what their constituents want. And, so we have to make a motion to do that, or are we just gonna put it on for action?
Let us know if you want us to move it just for action. And I guess I don't understand what the actionable item is.
Just that would be, well, it's 6 months to get ready.
Is what I'm asking though.
You need a budget.
I get that. Is the actionable item to put it in the curriculum guide? Because, again, we have dozens of classes in the curriculum guide that don't run.
Well, there's no reason to do that. I think the actual item would be is if you have the support from the community and people who are taking the survey.
That's what I'm saying.
Then we would then allocate the money.
Sure.
Because we had that debate back months ago, we came up with ideas that other board members even want, not even myself, and we have funding available to do things like this, if it's the interest of the community. So I guess then,
Budget should.
We would want to include other items from the survey.
Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely.
If I could ask a question, though, from a process standpoint, so that this looks a little bit more like what we've done with other changes to curriculum or new program offers. If the results are there, in the survey, wouldn't it make sense for Ms. Mosier to then come to us, the board, with the budget, with the expectations for what she's going to need to get this off the ground, and an identification of what we have and what we don't have, and then ask us to vote on going forward with that?
It would actually be in the overall budget.
Okay.
Because even with the science piece, you don't typically vote on individual science forms. It's wrapped into the budget, and we are identifying that this is a new part of the budget.
Right.
So we would do it that way, definitely.
Well, but from a timing standpoint, if the support comes back from the surveys that that's something we do want to pursue, and we're targeting the academic school year 1920, is that something that we're going to have to include in an amended budget this year for expenditures in anticipation, or would that just be rolled into next year's budget?
That's correct.
So I do just want to add one piece. So there are, as Dr. Chesney mentioned and Mr. Vecchione mentioned, there are courses that have gone through a process already that we will bring forward in regards to approval. So this would follow suit. So if we came back and said we want to move forward, we would still have to get a group together to put the curriculum and all that, those items together. So I do want you to understand there is additional work that's going to go through it before it comes to you. And approval as well that says we are adding this.
Yep.
Actually, okay. I just want to make that clear.
So do I understand that we really don't have anything else to do at this point with this? Is that what it's gonna go through a process?
We're gonna release the survey, and then we'll bring you the information, and then you can tell us the next steps to take.
Which would be, to me, our normal process of what we followed with everything else that we've brought through. Right? A little bit different. Bill?
So are we, as a board, going to determine what's viable with the survey, or is that going to be someone else?
Personally, I would look to the administration to vet through what numbers are and provide us a synopsis or an executive summary of what the findings are.
And then are we, as a board, going to determine that those are sufficient numbers, or someone else can?
I think it's up to the administration to make the recommendation of what they believe the numbers are saying.
Okay.
We're obviously still voting on the money, though.
Right.
Right.
So then I'll make a motion. I want to make sure it's moved up for action for the next
motion is to put it on
For action.
for action next.
Yes. And we'll look at this, as Dr. Chesney said, we have for action as the survey is presented, so the survey results will come in, and I'm all about the coding, I'd love to see all that, so we'll see what happens.
So is there support for the motion?
Support.
Well, I'm seeing, I'm hearing two things. One says, we're talking about we're gonna follow a process, and the process that we follow when we're adopting curriculum. And the other says that we're not, that we're going.
What you heard was a motion, no, there is a motion. The motion is to, and then what'll happen is then we can decide as a board about the budgeting for it, and if the budgeting is decided, then they'll decide about the curriculum.
So the motion is taking a different track than what is normal process. And we have
Absolutely.
support for the motion, so any further discussion?
Well, I still don't understand why there's a need for a motion to move to for action an item that's currently on for future action.
Because then we can decide.
But isn't it automatically going to be?
No.
Didn't we keep it on future so we can keep talking about it?
Yes.
Okay, so now it's just move it.
Correct. It's not automatically gonna get moved.
I don't think it needs a vote to move.
Well, that's I guess that's ultimately.
It should move right back.
I mean,
Yeah, it should
We're moving
move.
the survey
It's
on
been
the
on.
ground, so, and then so it should be moved, but I did it, so I have support, I guess we have to vote on it, because we need a roll call vote. Is this action right?
I don't know what we're voting on.
But whether, if this will move to action, for action in the next meeting. J-ROTC program will move to for
Along
action.
with the other items.
Along with the.
Everything that's on the survey.
And not, and be different than what is normal process. So.
Yeah, I'm now more confused than I was a couple minutes ago.
So the motion, of my understanding on what the motion was and with support is that the J-ROTC program, along with the other items that are in the survey, so the languages and coding, are moved from for future action as an ongoing discussion item to for action in the next meeting.
But we're adding, by doing that, we're adding items that weren't part of this future that we're talking about. The other items can't be added to this right now.
All of this is dependent on the survey.
This is all dependent on the survey, so.
If it's, well, good point.
It's got a process otherwise.
And I guess my other question is, if we're putting this on for action at the next agenda, what is the expectation that we are voting on at the next? Because that's the reason that things go on to for action is because the board needs to do something. And the only thing I think we would be able to do with just the survey results without any of the other work that our curriculum team needs to put into a new addition or a change to curriculum is to say, yes, we would like you to do the rest of the work. So do we need to vote to give the administration direction, yes, go do the rest of the work, and that's what we'd like to do at the next meeting?
I think what I was looking at is moving it to, for actions, the funding, so that the board approved the funding should the administration then take it to the next steps, because I think the amount of funding here is significant. And I think it takes a board, kind of, again, it's not being brought to us, we're bringing it to them. So, this was a board generated idea, as well as Dr. Chesney's ideas as well, and Kenny brought up a valid concern. So now I'm going to have to make an amendment to my motion and just bring up the JROTC program in the next for action, and then the other things to be considered, because that's true. We had to discuss those all. Those were added to it. Maybe you weren't here, but they were added to it on a separate item. I think in all fairness, those should be up for discussion. I would present them in the same way. And maybe they'd be on them for future, the other items on the deal. But for now, again, it's up to the board. So I'm going to amend my own motion to do the JROTC program for action pending the discovery of the survey. That's what I'm asking for. And then the board would then decide about the financing behind it for the administration to take it further, should that survey determine that
just,
I don't see any reason.
I'm not processing it right now. I'm just trying to, because again, I'm asking myself, what are we voting on? Because,
Finances.
so then, why don't you make the motion that we vote on the finances for whatever that dollar amount was?
I just did. I just want to say.
So that's what we're gonna vote on, whether we as a board would approve.
The financing to fund the program,
Okay.
depending on the survey results.
Okay.
That's all. And then it's up to administration to put that all in the wheels in motion. And also in all fairness, on Dr. Chesney's coding thing, the language is, like I said, it's not my thing, but the coding and all that, I know much more about that. And like I said, I'd love to see a positive thing come in on that as well. And look at developing it, and the board can decide how to fit that into curriculum. That may not be as big of an expense, and probably won't be.
Is there a ceiling on that amount?
We had a quote given to us from Colonel, and I think we had some finance numbers that, Ms. Moser, what were the finance numbers that it took to put the ROTC together?
I think when you had said a 3-year, I think it was $500,000. I think it was about 150-ish
Per year.
per year, if I recall.
And we won't get any additional funding for this. This is going to be all come out of the school finance, so general fund expenditure. And he promises, no support.
So you have a motion, is there support?
We have support.
I don't know, is there support for the amended motion?
Yeah, I'll support this.
Okay, so now we've got a support, is there discussion?
I am very supportive of this district continuing to explore a JROTC program. I know from experience and growing up in a Navy family and having gone to a high school with a strong ROTC program, I know a lot of people that have been through it and have gotten tremendous value out of this program. So I see the value in the program, and I'm happy that Brighton is considering whether that's a good fit for our school district, whether we have enough kids interested in it to have a viable program. I don't feel like we have enough information from our administration on whether we have the space, can we find the teachers, how much the books are going to cost to really feel comfortable voting on a $500,000 expenditure. I want us to get there. I want to see the survey results. I want the administration to have time to put together a budget that's more concrete than what we've had so far before I'm going to feel comfortable voting on it. I don't have a problem with it being on the agenda next time, but I'm concerned that we're not going to be able to reach a consensus in favor of the JROTC program at this time because we're going to need more information to justify that kind of funding. But that's obviously just my opinion.
Mr. Chesney, or Dr. Chesney.
I have two things. The first one I'm sure will draw controversy, but I moved to table the current proposal.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
We're tabling this current proposal, and then I have no proposals on it. This would be what my,
There's a motion on the motion. I think you'd have to make another motion to amend the old motion or something.
Why are you thinking?
my amendment would be this, that we follow typical curriculum process pending survey results to determine curriculum modifications and improvements. That would be my amendment.
On a note, there's still discussions phases, while there's never been typical curriculum procedure.
Well, we have an amended motion, so do we have support of the amended motion?
I'll support that.
Okay, so now discussion.
Well, I guess I tend to, I agree with Alicia's comments and the concerns. I think, so if we go the route of having for action a decision on just the funding, and we don't have enough information at that time, and it gets turned down, and it gets denied at that point, does that effectively end the pursuit of that? And, I mean, it shouldn't, but I'm concerned that if it gets denied without all the information, then, you know, we haven't let it basically be given the due diligence that it requires. And I mean, I think all of us conceptually support the pursuit of this program. I mean, I certainly do, and I know that the comments that have been made by others do as well. I mean, we were all unanimous in pursuing the survey and really trying to get to the heart of the information. I mean, I'm concerned about jumping to a point at the next meeting when it may not get the support that it needs at that point in time because other board members aren't comfortable with the support of the program. I don't have a problem at putting it on the agenda for action, but I don't know that we should hamstring what is going to be considered by tailoring it just to the financial piece. I mean, I don't think we should restrict it to that. I mean, that's what I think.
To piggyback on that, that's why I just supported Dr. Chesney, because I believe that process is exactly what we're still going to end up going through, regardless of what we put on for action. We're still going to need more information, and I don't want to see it killed or passed without that information. So I agree. I'm in support of this. I'd like to see if this program is viable. I don't want to see it get to next week and get quashed and it's over because we didn't have all that information.
I think it's ridiculous. I think, again, there was plenty of time to do all that. There was plenty of time to figure out what this stuff costs. If we can figure out how to spend $50 million, we can figure out how to do a program or not do a program. And if there's support for the program, then the goal is to turn it over to administration to say that it's funded. That's all. It's not that you're going to say you have to run this program. The idea is that the board supports the financial objective of it. The financial objective is not going to change between now and next year or 2 years from now. We already know what the ante is and what the buy-in is. So I don't support. I've listened to everybody's concerns. I've listened to the stuff in business for my lifetime, and I can tell you right now that you don't have support for this program. You're not supporting this program. So let's not look at it any other way, because you can put it under action, and you can say the survey says that only 5 people wanted to do it, then we're not going to do it at this time. It doesn't mean we won't put it in the curriculum guide and look at it a year from now and do things like that. But the reality is that if you're going to step up and do it, and I'm just going to say what I'm thinking, which sometimes isn't as pleasant as it needs to be, but the reality is, I said to you guys, I've said to the board, you granted the raises, you handed out millions of dollars, millions, 500,000 this year, plus over $1 million additional personnel and staff. When you did it, I said, what if somebody brings a program that's going to cost money for students, it could be a benefit to students, how are you going to allocate the funds to do it? You said, oh, no problem, we'll look at them, we'll look seriously at them. This is one of those times that you either look seriously at it, or it's just a push it down the road kind of idea. And clarity to me is, you know, Dr. Chesney got involved initially, added some things to it. I would rather he added it prior than the day that we're trying to move this a little further down the road, which then brings up the situation with Mr. Stahl, which is factual. So now we got amended, just a bunch of stuff. It's ridiculous. It's beyond anything that I could even think of. So I'm going to hold my temper and patience here. This is ridiculous. Just to say that it's okay to say you don't want to do it. It's okay to come to an action item and say that, well, you know what, we didn't get enough survey, or you know what, even though we didn't get a survey, we'll put the funding there. If we do get the support, we'll do it anyway. But I'm not hearing that. And I don't even know what we were going to vote on if we had this amended motion. I have no idea. So I guess the clarity, sorry, what are we going to vote on?
So I'll tell you what I think I heard. I'm going to try to draw it together. That's what I think I heard. I think I heard Mr. Connolly say that what he'd like to move forward is if there's enough positive response that we'll decide together to put not only JROTC but the other programming in the curriculum guide. Then we put it in the curriculum guide so that when kids in late January, February, March start to select classes, it's clearly identified as an option in in the curriculum guide, whether it be coding, Mandarin, JROTC, whatever. And then what I heard you say is based on that, as Dr. Gistinger and myself budget for next year, because JROTC would be listed in the guide, we would earmark $150,000 in next year's budget, not this year's budget, but next year's budget as a placeholder, as well as whatever the fees would be for a Mandarin or a coding or something like that. So as we build our budget for next year, and we do this every year as it is, and we know that there's going to be, or we expect there's going to be this many kids, then we would place that in the budget as part of your general budget. And then what I think I heard was, if there's support, and if we put it in the budget as we build next year's budget, as we bring the curriculum adoptions forward in the late winter, early spring, as we typically do, this along with the other items that were identified as possibly wanting would be brought by Ms. Mosier, and that's what you all would vote on. That's what I heard. And so I don't think we're committing to anything, really. I think we're getting caught up in some of the minutia of this piece, and really what I'm hearing, if I can put it in a nutshell, is everything goes in the curriculum guide, kids pick what they want to pick, and if they pick Mandarin or JROTC, you expect Dr. Gistinger and myself to budget for that. And go through a normal process to bring it in front of you so that you can give the nod that it's added to the curriculum guide after support is shown. Is that close?
Can I just say that sounds like the process? And regardless of what we do with this next week, that's the process it's gonna go, right? If she gets enough information to bring it to us to say, yeah, we're gonna put it in the guide, it's gonna do that regardless of what we do next week. That was my understanding, John. I'm sorry, that's where I'm going with it.
Perhaps this is a question for folks that have already run JROTC programs directly, but I think it's a little bit different than just adding a new programming class or a new language class to the curriculum guide, because you're making a multi-year commitment to a comprehensive program that you're going to make available to your students. So if we go forward with 20 kids in year one, we have to, let's say we quit, but let's, whatever number of kids we have show up the first day, we're not just making a commitment to them for 1920. We have to be prepared to support them all the way through, and the numbers of students in the program and not in the program are going to fluctuate. If we have 10 kids take it the first year and not show up the second year, we have a problem. And I think that's what I'm hoping the survey will help us, and what your recommendations will help us understand is how we do that, because this is a comprehensive multi-year program, not just a one semester, 1 quarter elective.
So my understanding from the Colonel and from reading up on the program is that it doesn't run less than 100. So if 20 kids sign up, it doesn't go. If 80 kids sign up, it doesn't go. And that's because my understanding from the Colonel was it's a certified program. So
I think he said 70 to get it started, but
I think what I heard was if you had 100 for 2 years or 1 year or whatever, and then it fell back to, I think he used 75, then you could spend that year on probation. That's not the word he used, but you could still run it at 75. But if in the year after that you didn't hit 100 again, you didn't run it. That's what I remember from that in terms of it being certified or uncertified. The piece about it being certified is that would qualify it to be part of our elective and count as a visual performing arts. So that I think that number would be important. So I think the number Liz and I are looking for is probably 100 or close to it of people that are interested in the program, because that would dictate or say to me, we at least need to put it in the curriculum guide to see if these 100 kids are going to sign up. If they don't sign up, then we don't budget for it that year.
And that makes sense.
So I think, where we're at right now, I think we've discussed this at length. This board, for the last 4 or 5 years at least, has defined a process and has followed a process. And there's no reason from my seat that we would change our process for this. It's no different than the science curriculum. We follow the same process. We're following the same process with this as well. I think we're on the right track. I believe we're doing what we're supposed to do. We're doing our due diligence. If there's support for it, it will show in the survey, it will show in other forms, and we will continue to proceed and move forward. But to try to create another layer in this mix, for what purpose? What is our gain? What's the hurry in rushing through this?
It's the idea to get the budget set so that if it runs in 6 months.
If the budget needs to be set, we'll set the budget.
We'll
But
see.
right now, our responsibility to this community, to this district, is to follow our process and make sure that we're vetting out what is appropriate and what's going to be supported within the district. And if it supports it, we will find the money to make it run.
I have a question. Dr. Gessner, how much did we spend on the string torch?
That's a good question.
500,000?
Oh, goodness, no.
400,000?
So, no, our equipment was probably, this is completely off the cuff. I'm thinking maybe around 50, because remember, we bought all those instruments from, yeah. And then our teachers probably 70, I mean, all in with benefits.
And we were able to put that together in, what, a year's time or so?
Well, I would say after Dr. Gray for probably 5 years.
Seemed like that. Well, I think if Laura was here, I think 5 years ago we started this process too, if I recall. Is that correct?
I know the program's been talked about.
No, Laura ran it, and what we did is we went to the Army, and they didn't have any programs available. Recall? Did they bring available to you? She checked it. Dr. Suri did. So I would say again, in patience and time frame and opportunity, there certainly is an opportunity. There's certainly an opportunity for students, and this program wouldn't have been sent out through normal curriculum. It's not happening. This was brought by a board member, as well as, like we talked about, several others, all of which are 100% successful, I might add. At capacity. Every single program that I brought to this board is at capacity. This is, again, all I'm saying is, I'd like this board to make a decision to say, if it's the right thing to do for the district, that you'll fund it. That's what I'm asking for in the action. You'll turn it over to curriculum, which you haven't, again, I'm not happy with your training tonight. I don't think you're prepared at the level I'd like you to be prepared on this. But that's okay, by the time you be prepared, we got plenty of time to do that. You have to become an expert if we seriously want to do something like this and spend $500,000 in taxpayers' money. It's a big commitment. We're not taking it that we're very serious about it. I'd like to be very serious about it. That's all.
So we have an amended motion from Dr. Chesney with support from Mr. Stahl to follow the typical curriculum process pending survey results to determine curriculum modifications and improvements. I'm going to move to vote on this and we'll do a roll call.
We just had a point of clarification.
Yes.
Because there's been lots of things discussed. Is what Dr. Gray described what Dr. Chesney's motion encompasses in terms of the process that he articulated of what would be the anticipated action at the next meeting?
I don't believe so. That's my interpretation. I believe what, and I don't want to misinterpret what you're suggesting, but at this point in time, my understanding with the amended motion would be that we continue to follow our normal process, and this will remain in for future action until we have survey results and until we're prepared to react to what the results are, and then move forward from there based on what is being recommended by the administration. And is that accurate? Okay. Is that, no?
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure I understood.
Okay.
I think, yeah, okay.
So that's what we're voting on. Ms. Ackerman, roll call, please.
This is for the last.
For the amended, your amended Okay, that moves us to item D, which brings us back to the bond.
But before we get there, so just so I understand, so it's gonna stay in for future action, so what is?
What do I do?
Right, that was what I was gonna get, what is, I mean, to me, I was hoping that it was the same informational ends, whether it was for future or for action. That's
So I'll tell you what I think I'm supposed to do. I think tomorrow I'm supposed to release the survey. And then December 10th, bring the results. And then December 10th, make recommendations of whether to put it in the curriculum guide or whether to
Right now, we're,
take it through the process for the
how long are we running the survey for?
The current one says through Thursday, December 13th.
Okay, so we said 2 weeks, which was, I remember, that's what we had talked about originally.
So we won't have results at the next
We
meeting.
won't have results
You'll have some, you might have enough.
we can give an update of where it's at. You know, that'd be 3 more days. We at least have usually we get the most feedback initially when it's sent out, within the first couple of days.
And that percentage, the percentage that you'd be comfortable getting back is what percentage?
For parents, they say about 20%, and then from students, I have to check, I think it's 40 or 60. Yeah, it's either 40 or 60, one group is 40 or 60.
We'll look to for an update at the next meeting.
And then we'll decide the route to go at that point.
It just continues to stay on for future,
That's correct.
because of blue cash.
Correct. Item D, bond.
If there were other questions, or I think we were going to talk about the dollar figure, the final dollar figure.
We lost momentum from the original conversation.
Yeah.
So I summarize what I remember is you were talking anywhere between 50 and 53. We were talking about, you know, what dollar figure you'd want to move forward, or if there was a idea that you wanted to move it backwards, some process that you would go through in order to move it backwards.
Do we have any official record of the results of the original board workshop that we had, where we discussed this? Where we
I took the notes, it's on my PowerPoint, so Star and I both wrote handwritten notes down.
Okay.
And then she typed those handwritten notes down. And then I updated the PowerPoint, which you've received. I updated the PowerPoint and sent that back out to you. And if you recall, there was red strike through and then a new total. And then what I asked Mr. Heff to do was to take those ideas and put it into an actual document and get the correct amount of contingency in place.
All right, so the updated PowerPoint that you sent out post the workshop
Yes.
is consistent with this document?
That's correct.
So we can play those two off of each other and understand exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
The only difference would be, go ahead.
And one clarification I want to make too is that on that last sheet you're looking at, item number 15, educational issue costs, the bond issue costs, that's still a wild card. We have not talked to the financial people to say, is that $250,000, is it $500,000, or, in other words, now that you know what you're going to, you maybe come up with a dollar amount, and we know when you're going, that can be refined. So that's still a moving target. I apologize, it's just your financial people.
And which figure is that? I'm sorry.
That's item number 15. Line item 15 is $250,000. That's just a placeholder at this point in time.
Column 15?
Column 15, I'm sorry, column 15, last page.
Okay.
I point that it's just a placeholder at this time. Could be more, could be less. It could indicate interest on the loan, depends on, when it's set.
What's that dollar amount?
Yeah.
I'll say I was more comfortable staying on 50.
I was too. But for me, it's, as as much a question of exactly what are we doing with those dollars. I mean, we've seen municipalities and school districts in our area fail to get the bonds that they asked for very recently. So I think it's important that we are clear about exactly what we're spending the money on and why we're putting it in a bond versus someplace else. Construction is easy. Those are big ticket items that it makes sense to bond for. I would like to spend some time going through what we've got as project number 7, because that's $22 million in estimated cost, more than $22 million in estimated cost. And we've got a whole lot of stuff bundled in there. We've got the STEAM building at the high school. We've got some of the renovations at the other schools around the district, plus boilers, ventilation, bottle filler stations, air conditioning equipment, maintenance, dome, and furnishings and equipment. Is that, can we talk about some of those individual pieces and make sure that we're comfortable with lumping them all together and comfortable with including them all in the bond? Because we spent a lot of time at the workshop talking about things like ventilation and boilers that had to be done. They were not optional because the equipment that we have is near the end of its lifespan, failing, difficult to replace parts for anymore, so we have to do that work. I'm looking at the estimated cost of the project and going down through the line items. I really do want to make sure that those things are, I kind of want to make sure those things are treated separately to make it very clear that we have covered. This is not all just improvements for STEAM programs, even though those are very important and they've got a lot of support from the board and the community. Some of these items are not optional, frankly. I mean, we can't expect that all of the boilers at the high school are going to last forever. We cannot continue to neglect or continue to not address the heating and ventilation system at Scranton. If we don't do this through the bond, we're going to have to find the dollars someplace else.
I agree. I think that's what this breakdown is. It represents all those things. But I also see STEAM Center in new construction than I see it in renovations. I'd like to just to know a little more about what that means. I imagine it's the rooms around the vicinity of the new STEAM Center. But again, I said I'd like to be under 50, but if it's 51 or 52 and I know exactly what it is, and I'm like, God, that's just, yeah, we can't do it. And that's where I'll be saying, absolutely, let's go. That's all I see anymore.
I think the moving target is the $10 million because that's probably the point, that's probably the amount that isn't defined very well. And that's, a quarter, however you want to look at it, of the bond, okay? And then you say, well, how do you define the STEAM, $10 million worth of STEAM? Well, half of that is a new facility on the back of the high school, which you can say, here's what it is, and this is what we're going to do. The unknown is the other $5 million, which encompasses the elementary schools and the middle schools, which you say, what are you going to do there? And I'm in just as much dark as what everyone else is as to what's going to happen. But I don't know any other way to approach it at this point in time other than to put a cost, because if we don't have money to hire an expert to come in and tell us what the cutting edge STEAM renovation for an elementary school should be, why should we even do it? Right? I mean, if we're going to do it, let's do it right. How much is that? I think this is the best effort moving forward at this time based on these guys' experience and what we've conveyed to them as the best representation at this time. So I don't see anything more we can do at this time to define that right now, that $5 million, until we engage an expert to say, yeah, you guys are 100% on track, or we take their word for it, which is why we've engaged them in the first place, to give us some guidance along these lines. And I think if they feel comfortable with that amount of money, then that's kind of the way we go until we know exactly what that amount's gonna be. And that's kind of what the contingency is for. So if it does run over the stated amount, then there's money there to ease that burden, if that's the case. Or if it doesn't spend the whole amount, then it goes somewhere else. There's things in contingency.
Can I talk a little bit about the history of the dollars? Because I think we're struggling also. What I'm hearing is, how did we get from 39 to 53? So if you go back, the whole discussion of the original bond was 127 million. So that was the need identified in 2009, 10, and 11. So we walked the entire district with people like Scott and Pete and construction people, and we identified a list of 127 million. The original board said that's too much, and so we went through the process, pared it down to 88.5. So the difference between 88.5 and 127 million is $38.5 million. There's your 39. That's how we got to it originally. And then we talked about adding the STEAM Center to the back of the high school. So the STEAM Center on the back of the high school originally was about $5 million. And then you throw the dome in, that's how you got to the original $45 million. And then you throw in the contingency, and you have to up the contingency because it's a bigger amount, right? So the percentage is bigger. So that's how we got into the mid-40s. And 6 months ago, we said this bond's going to be $45 million. The additional $5 million, and now an additional 1.7, that's on top of the STEAM Center and STEAM Centers at every building is another 6.7. So now you're in the 51.5 range. And again, your dollar figure got bigger. So 36% of $7 million or more dollars equates to your cost. So it's pretty easy to track back and see how we got from 38-ish, 39 to 45 to 53. Because you've only added 2 items, really. You've added a little more at the high school in terms of STEAM, and you've added STEAM at the rest of the building. Everything else is primarily the same. The bottle fillers are a little different, little tweak here and there, but nothing of significance. We've known Scranton's HVAC has had to be replaced for 4 or 5 years now. Is it still operating? Yes, but it would be wrong of us not to say, hey, that thing's coming to the end of its life. We're going to have to do something. It's $1 million. Same thing with everything else. All of these were identified in the original bond. It's just when we chunked them in categories, we said, have to do, probably should do, we're going to do it down the road. We had 3 categories, and this $38.5 million is what we knew we had to do eventually. So that's how we got to this number.
So what we did in our last discussion though was the 47. That was 647 without the ads. I thought that was including.
You didn't change the contingency.
I see. And then the other
again, if you're at 38, you go to 48, you got 10 million. Add 34% on that.
Gotcha.
$3.5 million bucks. Now you're right back to your $52 million.
So the goal, from my perspective on the bond, was to add student opportunities besides just maintenance. Maintenance, again, say it any way you want, your general fund dollars control how much maintenance you can do without raising taxes. And this board is elected to give all these raises over every year now in the last several years, handed out millions and millions of dollars that technically could have been some significant amount, in my opinion, could have been put away for doing maintenance. The other option was the sinking fund. So the goal to me for the bond is to see value added for students besides maintenance. If we're going to raise taxes, which in this case we're not going to raise them, we're going to extend them, which is technically still a tax, then I can see the value in it. If it's a maintenance deal and we're going to do maintenance only, I'm going to say go on a sinking fund personally, and get the money that you need, and also set your budget so that we don't hand out all these raises and you take per pupil funding. We received, again, an $18 million offset from LASA for our general fund that we were underfunded in, and we received over the next 10 years. And again, just recently received another $2 million a year from our governor, which we handily spent the first year we got it. So, in personnel, and which again, if it helps our students, that's going the right direction. But at the same time, it went into raises and additional personnel, particularly not teachers. So, that's my gut feeling on this thing, and I agree with the board, you know, you have parameters around it, but it also has to have some value to the people within, inside the building. Students don't know what he's seeing, it's on the roof. They're never gonna know what's running out there, they know when it's out, because it's too hot. These buildings aren't set up to be without air conditioning, so that's kind of how I'm looking at the budget. So if it's 47 or 52, doesn't make a rat's to me at all, as long as it gets the value to the student for additional opportunities that they didn't have today. We're going to enhance things and make it where they have better opportunities by using the taxpayers' money that way. And then I can get behind it. But I think the school system, like I said earlier, has done, I believe, a remarkable job in a turnaround fashion compared to where we started. Nobody has, well, Bill was kind of here, but if you were, and you know, Dr. Chesney claims he was there, but I don't know, he was in the same trenches I was in the school. I think we sometimes are in different positions. And
all three of my daughters went here.
The different, totally different situation. Totally different than the mass in your school. And I can tell you that for absolute certainty, that you didn't see it the same way I saw it.
So I can guarantee that.
I know that. And you took care of the first top 200 kids, and I took care of 5,800. So there's a different perception.
That is absolutely a different perception.
It is.
Mr.
I think as we
Just another thing, I think, because several of you haven't been involved in the process, you don't need all the answers today. Even when we went for the 88.5, you know, science classrooms were going to be renovated. We didn't have the explosion chambers and those identified at that point, because again, there's design work that happens after that. So if we're holding out for, and there has to be some definition, but for the actual pieces, that doesn't happen until after the fact. And that was the case with technology as well. So we knew we wanted to renovate the classrooms for Matt Jordan, okay, because Matt Jordan was going to expand his engineering program, because at that time the board said there's a lot of, just like the discussion we had tonight, there's a lot of interest behind engineering, let's build that program. So we identified,
Matt Jordan's class was closed. It was going to be closed.
Yeah, I'm going to finish that.
Let's just get to the point.
Finish that.
Okay.
So again, we had money in the bond for those renovations, but it wasn't specifically spelled out for the 3D printers and all the pieces that we did to renovate that. But we knew we wanted to spend the money there. If this board wants to allocate $10 million to STEAM, then that's why the per pupil worked for us. And then we'll work through with subcommittees and experts on what that's going to look like. It's the same thing. The original football field that was going to Scranton was going on the right side of the drive when you pulled in. That was the original design. But then we ended up running into under-earth issues with drainage in that, and it ended up behind the school. So what you're really voting on, or supporting or not supporting, is the concept. And then we work out the details from there. And if you want more details, we can do that as well. But again, some of it changes as we move forward. So, you know, that's kind of the process.
And so, to follow up on that point, and I think this was mentioned earlier, so what we are, at least as it's set up right now, to move for action next week, is to vote on what it is that's going to be submitted to Treasury, which in the current document is $53 million, and it has some placeholders for the STEAM Center. Obviously is the biggest one that has general placeholders as opposed to the specificity that some of the other line items has. This, as I understand it, this isn't intended to be the final piece that we're out selling this to the residents. It's going to have the specificity in terms of what we envision that $10 million being spent on. We know what the high school is going to be, but at some point, hopefully in a couple of months, or however long that process takes to get that level of specificity, we will know that. My concern, well, two things. One, I think, and ultimately the reason I supported the $10 million is to me, it didn't make sense. If we're gonna spend $5 million at the high school, we need to have a level of commitment at the younger ages. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to turn off the faucet for the younger students and then devote everything in the resources just to the high school.
We need to crank it up.
So that I think was important for me personally. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else. The other concern that I have is if we defer this until January, you're going to have 2 new board members that I think it's patently unfair to them. I mean, I know how, and we all know what the learning curve is just to understand this job in general, but then to throw them into trying to really understand the nuance. I mean, we've studied this for over a year collectively as a board, and now we're going to ask them to study all of this and have the same level of understanding that obviously we are coming to this meeting with. So I think, for that reason, I think it's very important for us to, whether it's 53 million, whether it's 49.99 million, whatever that number is, I think it is important for all those reasons that we do make that decision at the next board meeting, and then we can let the process run its course with providing a level of specificity. We're making the commitment for the STEAM at not only the high school, but the lower levels. We'll make that commitment, whatever that number is, in this application, and then we'll work on the specificity, and then the 2 new board members can obviously have input onto defining that specificity and what ultimately is going to be presented to the residents. So.
Well said. Yep. Thank you. Any other comments, feedback, complaints? That's why I asked.
Okay. So I've worked in STEAM my entire professional life. Right? And I understand it fairly well. I've got 4 different engineering degrees. And I don't know what STEAM renovations means. So there's $250,000 at each of the elementaries. And I'm infinitely supportive of STEAM renovations. You used the analogy earlier of, we didn't know what type of computers we were going to buy, whether we were going to buy Dell or Chromebooks. And to me, that's the minutia. It's like if we're giving it towards technology, I don't care whether we buy Dell computers or whether we buy Chromebooks or whether we buy Apples. But to have millions of dollars called STEAM renovations, and I don't know what that means. And that strikes fear into me as somebody who's worked in this field for so long.
So can I ask it a different way?
Sure.
Maybe this will help. So there's 500 kids at every elementary. So 500 divided into $347,000. Is that, in your opinion, the correct allocation per pupil for a kid to get good stuff related to STEAM? I guess that's a different way to look at it. So let's just do the math problem. What's that, $700 a kid, roughly? Is $700 a kid, $750 a kid, a correct per pupil allocation? Or should it be higher or should it be lower?
What are we going to spend $750 per person on? I mean,
right, that's all I'm asking. I'm trying to ask it a different way. Does that mean that we'll have the right technology equipment, that we'll be able to reorganize the space, buy the correct furniture, set up the correct computers? I don't know, because I'm not in STEAM. So your classroom, I would guess, would be a STEAM center at Michigan. So what do they spend per pupil there? I don't know that answer. I'm not being a smart aleck. I'm being serious. Yes. Is $750 a kid the right number for elementary? Is $1.2 million the right for 900 kids at the 5, 6, and 7, 8 level? Is $5.7 million right for 2,100 kids at the high school level? Because obviously I'm guessing the bigger the kids, the bigger the projects. So there's going to be a little bit of economy of scales in terms of that. So is that math problem right, or is it not right? And then I think you'll get to your number easier.
And how do we figure that out?
I don't know.
I mean, I can't tell you what that number is. I can't say 500 isn't enough and 750 is.
Right.
to me, and I completely understand Dr. Chesney's point, I mean, I think it's a valid concern, but I think the other thing we have to keep in mind is, part of this is looking at the overall, what's the total number? I mean, if the perfect number is $2,000 a student, that may be great, but we're not gonna float a $100 million bond so that we can build facilities to provide the optimal level. And that'd be phenomenal if we could, but we're working within those constraints. And for me, you know, I'm looking at making a commitment to providing STEAM opportunities at the lower levels, not just the high school, because I think it's very important we do that. And to make that commitment, we just have to set a budget and say, we're gonna make this work in terms of the commitment we're gonna make at this point. That may mean that we build a bigger wing at Scranton. I mean, I saw that Scranton in this document it's place marked for $1.3 million for renovations. We may have to build a bigger, or actually build onto Scranton to provide that facility. If we do that, that's going to require obviously more money allocated to the brick and mortar expansion of Scranton, which then will impact how money will be allocated to maybe the elementary schools of repurposing one of the existing rooms as opposed to building onto those schools.
Yeah.
But that process, we'll never be able to get to that process before the next meeting, or, I mean, that's going to require a commitment to a STEAM consultant. And
I would go back to the technology from the first bond, so 16, 17 million from the first bond. That was allocated per pupil. That's how it was done. Because we knew we had this many students at the high school, middle schools, and elementary. We had an idea of what we were going to purchase, but we didn't know all the specifics in terms of that. So again, was that allocation right? Depends on who you ask. We said we were going to refresh twice, which we've done. Now we've refreshed with different things than we originally thought. But again, I think if you're trying to get to a number, I think you have to decide as a group, is that number right for what we think we can do, or is the number not right? Does it need to be higher or lower?
I guess I'm looking at this, to simplify it maybe even for myself, is more of it's almost like seed money to start building a comprehensive STEAM program, of whatever that means. Now, is that going to require double, triple, quadruple that investment in years to come, perhaps? But I think that where we're starting and the threshold we set when we met a month ago, 2 months ago, was a commitment to the investment in STEAM. And our vision that STEAM was important to this district, from the elementary level to the high school level. And this is a starting point for us. I realize we're doing some now, but that this is a strong investment on behalf of us and the community to see this into its next iteration of what we want this to become. And I don't know that any one of us individually or even collectively can answer what that's ultimately going to look like in year 2, year 3, year 4, etc. But it certainly gives us a strong path to leverage off of.
Well, Andy, and I think you have to take into account as well the two gentlemen that are sitting out here who are professionals, who do this, who aren't taking a fee at this point in time. This is gratis as they proceed up to this point. But you have to trust in them as well, because this is kind of how they go about starting a project, right? I mean, when you guys start in a design, sit and listen, and then you start trying to put some numbers and a design to it. And I think this is kind of the same process, right? I mean, if we were completely off with our STEAM budget, I think you'd probably raise a flag and say, we think you guys are wrong here, or you're too much, or you're too less. We have to rely on you guys with your expertise, that you've been involved in this over, I don't know how many years, but probably well over 30 years each involved in this profession, to kind of say, yeah, we're in the right range for what we think we want to accomplish at the end of the day, or we're completely out, right?
I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. the complexity that you're kind of going around and so forth, if I may just add, is the fact that there really is no program written right now as to what you're looking for. And if I take a space, this space, no power, not enough power, not enough gas, no gas, no water, it's a completely different budget than if I took your science room you mentioned and renovated it into a STEAM center. On top of that, we haven't talked to the instructor and how they're going to teach it, because they may teach differently, or the curriculum may be different, which then enters into it. You referenced a consultant that specializes in STEAM. If they're like a lot of consultants, they're going to be way up here with their budget. I'm sorry, they will be. My job, our job, basically is that you've given us a budget of $10 million. That's what I have to spend that budget as best as I possibly can to get you STEAM centers at each one of the schools. Now, take example, the $330,000 is a budget, which again, comes back to the numbers right, as far as students. But I have to take equipment out of there. So it's not just renovations on per square foot. At some point, we've got to take out some equipment dollars. What are those equipment dollars? I don't know. I don't have that information because, again, the program hasn't been fully defined as to what is in that STEAM center. And certainly at the elementary school, it's totally different than what's at the high school. At the high school, you budget not only dollars, but then you also have equipment costs in there. So there's too many variables right now. You probably have a much better idea, perhaps, at a level that might be included in an elementary school STEAM center. But the dollar is $187 a square foot. That's a healthy budget to do renovations with, construction-wise. Even if you took out $30, $40 a square foot out of there, but again, it's only 1,800 square feet. That's a large kindergarten classroom. Actually, it's a classroom and a half, basically. Typical classroom size about 1,000 square feet, so it's almost 2 classrooms. Is that big enough, or you just need 1 classroom size? Again, more variables that enter into it. So right now, everything's up here for us to try to bring down into it. Again, $187 a square foot is a healthy number. If I was budgeting numbers for renovation, I'd be more 140, 150. Again, where am I bringing? What's I bringing to it? Am I bringing gas, water, electric, or is it already there? And how far am I bringing it? And what's the infrastructure as far as supporting it? We can try to look at some national averages and see what's out there, published.
I mean, I think national averages could potentially be good. I also think when we have great expertise, I see Ms. Adams back there in the back of the room with working, taking one elementary and taking, $250,000 and walking into that elementary with some specialists, and it's like, what would we think about doing in this building? Just one of them, to make it from this arbitrary number of $250,000 to some concrete, these are the 100 things or the 10 major things that I do in it. Then it's all of a sudden it makes this money real in how we're spending it rather than arbitrary. And similarly at the middle schools, it's just to understand. I mean, we came up with this number, and I know we came up with it on a per pupil basis, but I'd just like to know what it means.
So are we willing as a board to commit money to hire someone to come in and do that?
Yeah, and what do we, because we don't, I understood, and Dr. Gray and others have certainly convinced me that we don't want to be overly specific and risk getting down into the minutia at this stage. So it would be, I see the value of the consultant, regardless of the cost, more in the minutia, or at least closer to the minutia than maybe we need right now. Maybe right now all we're talking about is the per pupil investment in upgrading our STEAM capacity that this board wants to support. Because that's what this is. This is an investment in the future of our classrooms and students, and are we comfortable with that number and an investment to our STEAM capabilities in our classrooms.
The next item under STEAM renovations is bottle filler stations, and we have specificity to 40 cents.
We know there's 40 fountains presently in the district that are up for replacement.
Okay, and I get that, right? But there's a lot of specificity in here, except where we're spending the most money. And where we're spending the most money, we have no specificity.
The only other example I could give you from the last bond was playgrounds. So playgrounds were, again, every elementary had one, so did Maltby. And a per pupil allotment was set aside, given to the building. They met as a committee, brought in playground experts for safety and flowability and all that kind of stuff. And then they designed within their budget. So it's not as good of an example because it's not a classroom space, but that's exactly how it went. When we put it in the bond, there was $300,000 at every elementary for playground equipment and $500,000 at Maltby. And then they sat down and figured out what they were going to put in that space based on their population and how they run their centers. But I get the other aspect of it. That's not the right number.
Yeah.
But, I'm just saying that's how the allocation was done. It's another example of we felt when we put together the bond that $250,000 was the right number for the right amount of playground equipment, and then we let them decide after that.
If I could offer some value to this discussion, I kind of flipped a little bit with the discussion. These gentlemen telling me that that's a good amount of money to do a lot of things. I'm going to go to you, Mr. President, for saying it's kind of like we're seeding a program. I hadn't thought about it that way. It could cost more later, but we got to start somewhere. Dr. Chesney, I understand what you're saying. I'd love to say this is exactly what it is, but I don't think we can do it right at the beginning. I think right at this moment, I'm pretty much, you guys have convinced me. I think I'm a little more comfortable with this. I think this conversation is great.
The one last thing I'll add to this is I think we have to be, as we evaluate and we talk, and I like the idea that, you know, we certainly are going to be soliciting a lot of input from various stakeholders, and to a large degree those that will be teaching this, but I think we have to make sure, particularly in the elementary buildings, that we are not, or that we're creating consistency to some regard, so that it's not one program in one elementary and another program in another elementary, which then leads us into potential issues as they come together at Maltby or Scranton and the high school.
Or even balancing numbers.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all of that. So I think that's something that jumped out to me is.
And it's the only level where there's multiple buildings. So that's a great.
And right now we do that.
Yes.
Right
They meet
now,
as a committee.
The four of us do that.
Okay.
We work together for what our program is, so that's not a concern.
Okay. So, healthy discussion, absolutely. The intent then is that this item will move to for action in the next board meeting. Is that accurate?
For the amount per written.
Per presented in the document we received tonight.
Having said that, I mean, I certainly as part of that discussion, I mean, I think it's appropriate for us at the next meeting that if there are items that we feel collectively should be removed to get to potentially a number that we're more comfortable with, I think that's, something that, should be part of that conversation as well.
Which, to that point of Mr. Myers, then I think it would behoove all of us to spend some time between now and the 10th of December, going through each one of these items and making sure that there's either a clear understanding, as much as possible, obviously, based on the conversation tonight, of what it is, and then additionally, whether there's, if there's strong opposition to that. We did vote collectively in working through to generate this, but if there's something that just seems out of the equation, then.
Well, the only thing we didn't know about was the contingency. We didn't think about that.
Just proportion.
Yeah, proportion, so it's the number came in, that's what the cost had. And you're right on target on a lot of this, but I'll share with you, and I brought it up a minute ago about Mr. Jordan's classroom and a little quick history lesson. I was in that classroom when the ceiling tiles were falling down and the projects were getting rained on. Okay? Now, we're not in that position in the district. We got a ceiling tile fall down, we only fixed the roof. There was a time that myself and Mr. Tron, we had to go fix one almost in the classroom, but overall, they've been fixing them pretty regularly now, fixing the roofs in pretty good shape. But what happened from that program that was close to being closed because it had just not been looked at and looking at the opportunity to develop was now how we rank into that, Dr. Gray. How's that doing? We're top, that our engineering academy program. We're doing a great job. Probably one of the top there is.
Yeah.
And now we've moved our middle school kids up, which is the dream sheet for the STEM Center. We'll bring middle school students to the high school. So we're busing middle school students over to our engineering CAD programming classes at the high school and utilizing the facilities that we have.
7th hour.
And for 7th hour. And the students are getting exposed to that, which not any different than the ROTC program potentially that the 8th graders can move over. So the thought process and development, and differently, and you know, Dr. Chesney's got a good point on that issue about, well, geez, what's it going to be? But at the same time, when you build from scratch and you start with an empty page, and a lot of us have on projects, you develop and you take trust in your institution and your environment that they'll do it right. Like in the case of Mr. Jordan, we've blown out wall after wall now and created an environment that student learning is probably unsurpassed. I go in there and I brought people from industry, the vice presidents, North American operations for the Toyota, who came to visit here one night. We went in there and he had a couple suggestions, but they were everybody, and I think Dr. Ray will support this. We've brought through tours, I've done at least a dozen through our schools. And I even go to our TIPS program and different programs where we have the executives that come in and I use them for where we at in regards to current industry. Most of them said that we were ahead to the point of years compared to what they were exposed to in their current in industry. So the key to this is we have to be ahead of the wheel here. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy to do, to have visionary, and you're going to make mistakes. That's the other problem that I hear here sometimes, even with our issue with the RTC. You have to be willing to take a risk to see what the outcomes ever going to be, or you don't take any, and then you'll never see it. So I'll leave you guys with that, and I think that you're probably underfunding the grade schools, and you said, you know, it's just the beginning of a building block to see what the needs are going to be, and then maybe you're going to allocate general fund dollars once you see what that seed starts to grow and you're watering it, because again, you're going to have, down the road further, you'll have a different superintendent, you'll have different changes, we have a new director of curriculum, and Dr. Gessinger is going to, she won't be here, a year, 2, 3, whatever it's going to be, but when she signs a new contract here pretty soon. So I would suggest you stay on that, hopefully Dr. Chesney can stay in an advisory position on this coding stuff, and you guys are brilliant, so why don't you do that? And what the heck, if you got a card or two, help, maybe I can help you do that, right? I mean, that's what it's about, we're bringing gifts to this business. So let's keep the full set of steam up on it. I can tell you though, that your support is not going to be there with indecisiveness. So you have to be decisive and have people have confidence and know that you'll make the right choices as you move forward. And that's, again, there's a lot of right people here to do that. All right, thank you.
Andy, could we go back to the semantics of what you asked for, just because I think it's only fair that if we do have items of concern with cost, that we don't wait until the next meeting to bring those forward, that maybe within a week we submit them prior, just so there could be some vetting, just in case there's two of the same or whatever.
But if you haven't brought them forward,
well, hold on, I'm trying to get some clarity out of Andy here as to the process, because again, there's no sense of taking board time to go through these things if you do it prior.
Yeah, I thank you for asking that clarifier. I think it makes sense if we have anything in here as you review to send it to Dr. Gray and Star, and then they can summarize and then send that out to us maybe a week from Monday.
Is that by Friday of this week?
Friday of this week.
Okay.
And then maybe next Monday send out a revised version. I say revised version. If there's any items that have been noted, let's capture those, send those out, so that then we can be prepared to have
so
discussion.
You'll probably have to go back to these guys for a little bit of consulting.
Potentially.
Yeah, that's good one. So, yeah. Okay. Sure.
On that, so we would identify items that we might have issues with, and we identify, correct?
If there's something that you see within the numbers or within the project itself that you're questioning, let's flag those and bring those forward. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on some of the projects as a whole, because we did come to a consensus that the projects that are sitting there should be reflective of what we talked about. But if you see something that doesn't resonate, then let's flag it.
And related to that too, there's another process question. Is our intent are we intending to work down to a certain limit, or not necessarily? We're not necessarily. We're trying to hit a new target. We're not necessarily trying to hit a target. Okay, thank you.
I think we're at the target right now. We're not looking to exceed, but at this point, with the.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, board committee reports, Board of Education bulletins. Good to go.
First, thank you, Mr. Birchfield, for sending out the email from the Treasury. I, for one, as you asked, reporting that I have signed up for it. We'll see if I get in. The second thing I've got is I'll reiterate what I did last week. Our facilities committee meeting will be December 4th at 6 p.m. I believe it's the time that we agreed upon. I'd like to ask all of you if you have something that you want discussed there, that you want to make sure it's discussed there, to give that to Dr. Gray or myself, so we can add that to the agenda and bring back a report on that. Okay, that's it.
Base Foundation stopped by today and they dropped off an invitation. DFC, Third One Federal Credit Union, is making a donation to them, and they're kind of celebrating the whole educational thing. December 5th, 5:30 to 7 at their open house. And I believe it's a significant donation to Base Foundation. Are you aware of that, Dr. Gray? Or do you want details on it at all? Okay, well, they reached out to them, and Base Foundation will be handing that out. I'm sure you talked to their people, but through scholarships to students from Brighton area schools. Historically, that's what's been done. And so that should be a nice deal. So it's good to hear that support of the new bank is supporting our education. A while back, we were going to have this on an agenda, and we got to get stuff cleaned up. This is this issue about what's being taught in our classrooms. This particular item is regarding the white privilege issue. And it came up where I felt that I didn't think it should be taught in the classroom. Teachers supported it. They came and presented a case that they believed it was part of their duty to teach it. And I've had some informal discussion with board members about it. And some feel it's okay, some don't think it's okay. But the bottom line is, I don't think it's okay. My opinion is it's not okay. And for my own reasons, and that's what we're here to do. And so as a board discussion, kind of, because we didn't really fit in, I think we ran out of time in one of our meetings. We had for discussion, we didn't talk about it. Mr. Trombley, how do you feel about this being taught in high school?
I prefer it not to be taught.
Mr. Myers, any opinion?
Yes, I'm not ready to answer that. I'm not sure what specifically you're referring to, John.
I handed it out. It was a handout that was given to students, and it talks about the daily effects of white privilege. And I felt it was not proper. It hadn't been through curriculum, but it had been adopted by the teachers to teach it. So here's a copy. We can carry this on to the next meeting, but I handed it out. I thought everybody had a copy. And I don't know, Dr. Chesney, did you ever chance to review this?
No.
Okay, so nobody read it. So nobody was worried about it. Andy?
I'm not prepared to discuss this evening.
Okay. All right.
I read it when you handed it out, but I haven't looked at it in a month and a half, so I'm not.
Well, what I'm
get a look at it, and then I'll just raise the same question in the next board meeting. I'd rather just get it done with now, but I think that it's totally off target. I understand the reasoning behind it.